Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Spring was early that year. It was only March. Out for a walk. And there was no snow. It's an unusual sight for these parts. Normal. As they say, the monkeys' choppers are in full swing, but here there are puddles all around. Even the grass is peeking out. Soon the migratory birds, as if smelling the warmth, stretched out. The kites are already circling. The old men said, looking at the soaring predators in the sky. So the earthlings will be reborn. And then they talked about how everything is changing rapidly in the world and global warming is to blame. I don't know what the hell that is. Well, if the bird's flying home early, then the scientists are right. Something is changing in nature. And it's not a good thing. Old people in general like to talk to the point of creepiness, but young people have no time to listen. They've got work to do. In Little Moose Creek, after a winter's stagnation, life is stirring. Busy, as it is in the springtime in the village. Andrew had been back in the village for 6 months. He didn't like the noisy, stuffy city. He needs a lot of money, but where can he get it? He didn't earn much at the workshop, and what he got, he spent on food and lodging, and he wanted to go home, especially his old, sick mother. He left her with a heavy heart. How would she be without him? And then his mother got the happy news that they had a farmer. Abandoned farm buildings for repairing machinery. What kind of machinery did he bring? It looks like a field, but in spring he's going to start men. He's looking for workers. Maybe you'll come back, son. You're an excellent mechanic. Your father taught you. Then you got your certificates. Obviously, you'll be in good standing here. Betty asked him shyly. I'll think about it. Mamo, Andrew promised. To be honest, he wanted to scream. Yeah, sure. Only there was one thing but Jenna, his love. That's what kept him in town. He met Jenna not too long ago. It was still the bouquet period. How would he leave her? Jenna worked as a waitress in a cafe not far from the auto repair shop where Andrew worked. The lovers walked home from work together every night. First, Andrew would walk Jenna to her apartment, where she rented a room from a mean old woman, and then stomped to her dormitory. Easy conversations, jokes, kisses. It was all so sweet, but Andrew had it in his head to go back to Moose Creek. So one fall evening, he asked Jenna point blank if she'd go back to the village with me. I would, Jenna replied without hesitation. Andrew was a little confused and then rejoiced. So he was not mistaken in his choice. Girls love roses to the end of the world to follow him according to follow. Jenna really loved Andrew very much and was so afraid that suddenly he would disappear. But the countryside didn't scare her. She'd grown up there. True, at 16 she had to leave her native village after her mother. There remained only stepfather, who drank ungodly and drunk, tried to molest the poor girl. Here Jenna and ran away to the mountains, was able to enter the neck, even got a place in the dormitory. But only after graduation she was released into free floating. And where to? In the city at a large sewing enterprise could get a job, but it was a shame. Jenna herself didn't want to go to the underground seamstresses. She knew it was akin to slavery, so she decided to take a job in a cafe. It didn't pay $1 million, but at least she had a good meal. The cooks could sometimes share products that weren't liquid. They fed the poor orphan. Jenna worked there first as a dishwasher, and then she was promoted. The girls got her, and she became a waitress. Jenna lived with an old lady near the cafe. Half of her earnings went to pay for a stuffy room that looked more like a doghouse. But Jenna believed that one day things would change in her life. And that's what happened when she met Andrew. Life had taken on new colors with him. She was now ready to go to the end of the world. Moose Creek is Moose Creek. Betty was surprised to see her son with a girl. Even though Andrew had hinted that he was not coming alone, his mother didn't understand him. She thought he was coming with a friend who had decided to settle in the village. And here you are with a bride, so nice and friendly and respectful. From the first acquaintance, Betty Jenna began to call her daughter. The girl at first blushed at this was lost. After all, she had a mom was the only one, and here is some stranger woman. But soon she fell in love with Betty, and exactly like a daughter and became, and she called her only mom. In February, they got married. The three of them began to live together, and it was good for them. Andrew and Jenna only wondered why they clung to this town. Real life. Here it is in the steppe land of rare flights. Even in the South, rumors were happy. It's not like the endless noise of city streets. How fresh is the air? You could eat it with a spoon. So the mayor came, and the child was called to work at the club. It was the only cultural place in the village that hadn't been closed, except for a small store. The school was on lockdown for about 10 years. The nurses' station was also dead. But the club kept the village going. Old people are the majority. What entertainment for them? Do they even go to the club on holidays? Everyone communicates with each other, and the cultural workers with the kids will make a holiday for them. There were 10 kids in the village, by the way, and it's decent for their village. In the morning, they would run to the car that would take them to school in the neighboring village. And in the evening, returning, they hurried to the club, where they learned new dances, poems, and songs. I used to practice with them, but I couldn't. Her son took her to the city. Oh, how worried we got then. People said the club would close. And then someone remembered the zipper. You heard her sing at her own wedding. And Jenna sang really well. Talk to her. Then they told the district bosses that they had a ready-made employee. They gave the go-ahead. For those pennies that paid the artistic director, it was easier to hire a worker than the club. Even if you close it, you still need to keep an eye on the building. So let the artistic director keep an eye on it. Jenna happily agreed. She had performed in her village as a child. That the money is small, no problem. She has her own vegetable garden. A good husband can handle it. Betty was happy too. She was an important person. She was the cultural worker in her village. And Andrew didn't mind. Why sit around pots and pans all day? Let her work if she wants to. And he himself got a job with that very farmer. Peter was very pleased with a smart guy in his farm. Doesn't drink, knows about machinery. Not a man, but gold. He gave Andrew his best tractor right away, some kind of foreign tractor. It even has air conditioning in the cab. In general, you can work all you want. Andrew was honored by such trust. And he also enjoyed the authority of the other mechanizers, who, seeing that the guy does not know about machinery, all tried to ask him on business and without. Andrew helped, repaired, gave advice. He was ready to help. Yeah, spring is friendly. March flew by. Didn't see it coming. April was already counting down. The snow is gone, there's no rain. The sun comes, and the earth dries up. It needs attention. Before the men knew it, it was time to go to the field. The land had been resting for several years, and there was a lot of work to be done with it. But they knew their business, Andrew among them. He would go to the field in the morning and come back tired and grimy till night. Jenna was still laughing. The Murmansk tractor doesn't save the dust from the dust. Andrew in defense of his iron horse. They say he is good. Only one of his comrades' engine stalls, or the other one's engine sparks, so I have to help, and you have to crawl under the tractor and climb on top of it. It's a lot of things. What can you do? If the owner had enough money for only one decent tractor, it's okay, he's rich, he'll get more equipment. The main thing is that they get decent wages. With such forces, they'll soon clean up all the fields. Soon the wheat will fall into the ground. There will be a new life, and with it new hopes for a better future. That morning, Jenna was the first to wake up to a strange alarm. As if someone had tugged on her shoulder. Eyes opened, Andrew, peacefully beside her, reports Valley's mom in her room sunnily working. Jenna sighed, chased away any anxiety. Pressed her cheek against her husband's. What family? A wave of tenderness swept over her. How happy she was that life had brought her and Andrew together for a lifetime. Jenna carefully kissed her husband on the warm tip of his nose. Sleeping and knowing nothing, the young woman smiled. Yes, she would be sure to tell him today. Jenna clung tighter to her husband and straight silenced with pleasure, imagining her husband's joy. Yes, they are going to have a baby boy. That's for sure. Jenna had been to the district clinic yesterday morning, and they confirmed everything. Andrew came back late from the field. I decided to cheer him up in the morning. Andrew opened his eyes, smiled at Jenna. "You're awake already? What are you doing up so early?" "Sleep, baby." He killed his wife, and in his arms, she sang sweetly. Immersing himself in a pleasant rhyme, Andrew quietly got up and went to the kitchen. On the table, Jenna cooked from the evening, and under a white towel his breakfast, his favorite cheesecakes, was waiting for him. The kettle rumbled, and Jenna jumped up at the sound of it. Almost overslept, sending her husband out into the field. No, he always packs his bag of groceries, also prepared from the night before, and runs to the fur yard. He doesn't want to wake his wife. He won't realize that she's happy to see him off. And today, he has to tell her the most important thing. Andrew will find out, and all day long he will work happily. Jenna just got out of bed, as suddenly heard light discord in the yard male voices. The young woman anxiously looked out the window and aghast. The barely escaping dawn was covered by a milky white mist. Or was it smoke? Jenna even thought she smelled smoke. Toward the house through the yard were walking quickly Peter and Sam, one of the mechanics. Andrew had also heard the early guests and was already hurrying outside. They talked about something on the porch, and Andrew returned to the house and began to hurriedly pack. "What is it?" asked Jenna anxiously, glancing up from the bedroom. "The field's burning at Wendy's," Andrew answered quickly. "The fire is still far away from us, but there is such a wind that the field is about to be snatched away. There are still young and birch nooks, and if it spreads on the bears, then the whole bird will burn only to see the nest, and at least to repel. Medvedev, it was a very beautiful lake, and the local Finns loved it for fish abundance, for bird diversity. There were swans and geese there, and no ducks at all." Jenna gasped as she imagined the trouble the fire could cause. "Come on, boy," Andrew smiled affectionately. "Don't be scared in no time. We'll beat this fire." "Where did it come from?" "Men say it came from the neighboring region. Hunters probably scorching the grass, raising birds like that. Damn the bastards. Andrew, be careful out there, will you?" I heard the voice of Betty, who also woke up and hurried to come out to her son. "Didn't your hero cause much of a fire?" "We did." "Yes, until she gets there with annoyance." Andrew waved his hand and then smiled. "Okay, my favorite girls, I'm off." "Take care," whispered Jenna, Betty, and crossed to her son's back. Jenna stood on the doorstep and watched as a brisk stride. Andrew headed with the men to the fur yard, and some kind of anxiety clenched her heart painfully. Or maybe it's because I just didn't tell Andreyusha about the most important thing. Well, nothing. He'll come home, then he'll know. Jenna returned to the house. Not even had time to drink tea. With annoyance, she noted, going into the kitchen. How can he be hungry? He's always been like that. Betty sighed. Whenever something happens, he'd run to help. Well, God willing, he'll be done in an hour. Maybe Peter will let them rest. Even though the sewing season goes on every day, both women were silent, and each had a strange anxiety in her heart. It was like a cobweb knotting from within, and the smoke was already stinking so clearly that it became hard to breathe. Stepfire approached by that time already to the nearest from the village nail forbidden branches from the edge of the forest, with sick, thick cushion from behind the fallen leaves of birds that had already sat on the nests. Lurking they will die, but their offspring will not abandon. Others of their kin were scurrying over the forest with a desperate cry, and it was frightening. Pain and terror could be heard in their polyphony. The men rushed to put out the fire, using shovels and pitchforks and rags. Soon a barrel of water was brought up, and things went faster. Andrew on his tractor plowed through the forest. The field, from which to the village, was a hand's throw away. And it seemed that soon everyone exhaled. The fire was quieting down. Suddenly the men, as one in horror, cried out from the field to the very lake that bears are called. A column of fire rushed up. Apparently, the fire crawled along the grass like a snake, and then with the flow of wind it gained strength and rose. A little more and it will spread to the reeds, and there it will be a bad thing. The whole lake will go up in flames. There are so many reeds there, and there is also a bird sitting in it, and it will definitely not rise from the nest. Everyone will die. Andrew, seeing such a disaster at full speed, rushed to block the way to the fire to plow the lane. The men were fighting the fire and cursing the firemen. Where are they all? Why does not come to the rescue? And only when they had crushed the fire, they pushed it away from the lake. The long-awaited sound of sirens was heard. The firemen finished the men's work. They made protocols and reports and left. In the meantime, the men had recovered a little. That was their morning workout. But the lakes were saved and the forest was almost completely preserved. Of course, we still have to keep an eye out. But the main job is still done. The men thought that Peter would let them go home to rest, change clothes, have a snack. They were sitting at the edge of the woods, talking about what had happened. But the farmer had a different idea. He came over and immediately gave a command. Moisture addition should be finished on the far field. Enough of Russia's life for work. Men. Some of the workers earned, and at least a couple of hours to recover. But the owner stood his ground and the land is drying up. We have to do everything in time. And those who don't like it are free to go. But they can't wait for calculations. Come on, men. Andrew was the first to get up and headed for his tractor. Why are we stalling for time? Let's start sooner we finish. And the others got up. No one wanted to lose their bread. The field was just huge. They worked together. But still they had already finished when the sun was rolling towards the sunset. Everyone was tired beyond belief. Andrew too. He returned home on his tractor. His eyes were closing. He was exhausted. He was driving along an old dirt road that led along the forest to the village, which was rarely traveled by anyone, and how he did not notice it. There's a small rusty piece of pipe just squeezed out of the ground after the winter. Where did it come from? No one will say. Now it's just tired. Andrew. Very. And the tractor was driving home, hurrying to his beloved wife with a tasty dinner that his mother had prepared. At full speed, he ran into this piece of iron. Tractor hit an obstacle, jerked sideways. There was a steep slope. In a matter of seconds, the tractor suddenly slid sideways and then tumbled off the road. Everything happened in front of the bench, who was driving behind Andrew. Chuck jumped out of his tractor, ran to save his friend. The tractor's lying on its side. And inside Andrew is strong. He ears and splinters on the glass. And the blood just keeps coming out. He's unconscious and other men came up. They pulled Andrew out, and he was unconscious. And the first thing he did was to look at the tractor, gritting his teeth. When he saw what had happened to his handsome boy, then he looked at the worker. Peter shouted to him, "Chuck Andrew to the hospital urgently, because he'll bleed to death. Bring your Jeep. We'll put him on the back seat." "Why the Jeep?" Unexpectedly cold, the owner replied. "Call an ambulance." "Yeah, Andrew will be dead by the time it gets here," screamed the men. "He's not bleeding. He'll smear it all over the cabin," Peter muttered. "You'll clean it up later." They wrecked the tractor. "Now you want to tamper with my car too." From such words, the men were confused, but soon came to their senses. They grumbled. Chuck even attacked the owner with his fists. Yes, they held him back. Peter jumped into his Jeep, shouted that he called an ambulance and drove away. The ambulance didn't come for a long time, and Andrew didn't regain consciousness. Did you think his comrades would take him on a tractor? But shaking on the road would only make things worse. Finally, they heard the sound of a distant siren. They breathed a sigh of relief. Andrew will be saved. What happened to Andrew? Jenna found out from Fame. He came running like a madman and told everything. Darkened in the eyes of the young wife's legs went under. Chuck could barely catch her. "What are you doing?" He coaxed, frightened. "Everything will be fine. You'll see." The doctor from the ambulance said that the transfusion will be done and stitched where necessary. "How's the new guy gonna be?" "I have to go to him," Jenna whispered. "I should be there." "Where are you going now?" "It's nighttime." "Rest, go to Aunt Vali, and don't say anything yet. She's weak at heart." Jenna sighed heavily. "My mother-in-law might have a stroke from such news." "I can't help but say it when she's got it written all over her face." But she didn't have to say anything. From the corridor and heard a creak, and then the sound of a falling body threw serially with glory into the house. And there Betty lay. She heard her daughter-in-law talking to her son's friend. Jenna brought to her senses. The mother-in-law took her into the room. And then the two of them sat together, silent. They thought of one thing, only if Andrew got well. Late at night, I watched Jenna's dream. Barely got to bed. And she had a strange dream, as if she was running through a field, and around her there was fog or smoke calling Andrew. But he didn't answer. Then the smoke cleared in one place. Jenna sees her. Her Andrew is sitting on a hill entangling a fishing net. Looks at her and says, "Shoot him down. We want to catch fish." Jenna wonders how with Bagya, because he died a long time ago, Andrew. Andrew suddenly frowned and waved his hand, saying, "Go away, cold and aloof," as if he was not with her. Jenna woke up from the pounding of her own heart. Outside the window, the dawn was already glimmering with a restless dog. Anxiety did not leave Jenna. She looked at the phone on the fumes to call the hospital, or it was too early laughed after all. Dialed the number for the surgical department of the neighborhood hospital. Good thing she had still found it in the directory yesterday. It's only the 6th hour. Why are you calling so early? She heard a disgruntled female voice in the receiver. Sorry, Jenna Trolls didn't know how Andrew was doing. He was brought to you last night after the accident. The voice in the phone went silent. Can you hear me? Hello, said Jenna in a louder voice. Girl, call after 9 when the doctors come. Already without a shadow of discontent, replied the interlocutor. Okay, I'll call. You just tell me he came to his senses, nothing, and did not answer. The phone rang with short beeps. Betty peeked into the room that night. She'd really stuck it out and aged even more. What is the daughter saying? She asked quietly. They say Jenna played fine. The doctors will say more after 9 o'clock. They're the main ones. Betty exhaled and crossed herself. Alive. Repeated Jenna, dead man with white lips. In half an hour, she was already hurrying to the bus stop. Jenna decided to go to the hospital after all. She had to talk to the doctors. And maybe she would be able to see her husband? The bus stop was 2 kilometers outside the village on the highway. That's when the district authorities decided, and now, in any bad weather, the few residents of Moose Creek had to travel almost 2 kilometers to get to the district center. Fortunately, it was warm that May morning. Spring. Nature was fragrant and happy. The morning sun seemed to smile and generously gave its warmth. Jenna's heart felt warmer too. The anxiety had subsided a little. For some reason, she decided that everything would be all right. Already not far from Jenna's bus stop, the other day, Peter's Jeep looked out the window and offered her a ride. To the neighborhood. Yeah, I'm going to Andrew's. Come on, get in. I'm going downtown on business too. Jenna wanted to refuse at first. I mean, she'd heard how the farmer behaved yesterday. But then she decided that maybe he had realized everything. He would get there comfortably, and that was the main thing. In her situation, she should take care of herself. The bus is so bumpy on the way. Peter asked about Andrew, about Betty. And then, in the district center near the hospital, he suddenly said, Jenna, let Andrew get better. He's made a mess of things. Now he's going to have the tractor on his conscience. What do you mean? Jenna was confused. When I hired him, he signed a paper that he's responsible for the safety of the equipment and that he almost ruined the tractor. So, honey, he's going to have to compensate me for the damage. It's going to be $500,000 worth of repairs. $500,000 pale. Jenna, where are we going to get that kind of money? You know we live very modestly. That's your concern. When she gets out of the hospital, your husband should think about how he's going to pay me back. Let him take out a loan or go to the north to work. I don't care. He has to pay me back. How can you do that? Jenna resented. You provoked this situation, didn't you? I was told you didn't let the men rest after the fire. They were tired from working all day. And when Andrew crashed, you didn't even give them any help. I'm not a doctor, the owner grinned. All the more reason to help him in the hospital. What do you want now? All right, let him get better. Jenna jumped out of the car without thanking the driver. That's it. I wish she'd waited for the bus. And again the girl's heart squeezed with heavy premonitions. What else will happen? To the emergency room. She went in, looking worried and helpless. Girl, can I help you with something? A guard came up to her and looked at her questioningly. Yes, I need to know about the patient's condition. So ask the nurse on duty. The guy nodded sympathetically and led her into a small office. There at the table sat a woman of huge size with appetite, giving smoked chicken. The sight made Jenna feel uncomfortable for some reason. A nasty nausea came up to her throat. The woman, seeing her, hastily wiped her mouth, and even the last bite asked, "Are you on what matter for hospitalization?" "No. I would like to know how Andrew, who was brought in yesterday after the accident, is feeling." "Why did you come here?" Raised eyebrows, drawls, nurse closing a container of chicken. "Call surgery." "I did, but they told me to call back later." "But I can't just sit around and wait." "Wait for what?" The nurse snorted indifferently. "Your Andrew is dead. They've already taken him to the morgue." "How dead?" Jenna whispered. Her eyes went black. She couldn't remember anything else. The girl woke up to a pungent odor. The same aunt was poking her literally in a bout of sweat. Jenna was lying on the couch in that very office. But now she woke up. The nurse said in a satisfied voice, "What's so flimsy? You can't say a word to these young people. Kelly, get away from the girl. I'll do it myself. Go home already." There was another voice, a little indignant and harsh. Just then, Jenna saw another woman in a bathrobe, probably a little older than herself. She asked how she was feeling, helped Ira up. They went outside for some fresh air. "You'll have to forgive my colleague for being tactless. Kelly, for not thinking." Is it possible to say such things so easily? Did the girl justify herself? It's just professional burnout, I guess. You stop feeling other people's pain. But that doesn't excuse her, of course. "I'm sorry, so it's true." "Andrew's dead," Jenna asked, and tears sprang from her eyes. "Unfortunately, I can't give you any details. Let's calm down a little bit, and I'll take you to the doctor." The girl got a phone call. She was on the phone while she was looking at Jenna. "Who are you?" "Andrew?" she asked after the phone call. "My wife, for you, inviting you to talk to the head doctor. Come on, I'll walk you out." Jenna had no idea where she was being led. Didn't listen to the words of comfort. In her head sounded the drumbeat, "Dead, dead." How is it possible? After all, just yesterday Andrew was there alive and well, and then he snapped and ran away. Jenna could see him leaving the yard in the haze of the approaching fire. If she'd known yesterday, she would have held him back, kept him out. And then everyone would have judged her. Andrew would still be alive, but can you go back in time? In the office of the chief physician, she was met by a short, representative man in a white coat. He almost paternally put his arm around the girl's shoulders, sat her down in a soft chair, and brought her a glass of water. The chief physician sat down next to her, sympathetically lightly squeezed Jenna's palms in his hand. "Be strong, my dear. That's how it happened. Till death asks when to come. And we doctors, unfortunately, we are not gods. What happened?" Barely audible, Jenna asked. "I was told the ER doctor promised Andrew would be saved. On the phone this morning, the ER said everything was fine. The ER doctor couldn't say anything. I'm sure the ER must have gotten a call from an intern. She had no right to tell you that. We thought we'd call you later, and you came in on your own. I apologize to the emergency room nurse for being tactless. We'll punish her." "So what happened?" Jenna repeated. "My question." The doctor sighed, remained silent, as if gathering his thoughts, and then explained that Andrew had been brought in with massive internal bleeding. They had planned to perform a diagnostic surgery first, but before it began, the patient became ill and died on the table. It all happened very quickly. There was nothing we could do to help him. I just got a call from the pathologist saying it was a blood clot. Heavy bleeding caused him to move. The clot clogged the vessel and there was instant death, said the head doctor. You understand, we were powerless in this situation. Jenna listened silently and cried. And the head doctor said something. He also gently squeezed her hand. Then she offered to give her some kind of sedative injection. I probably shouldn't. Remember Jenna. Of my situation, I'm pregnant. That's how the doctor shook his head. Sighed heavily. You poor girl. Well, you hang in there. You need to be strong now. Try to think first of all about the baby, and then the trouble will go away a little. After he asked what Jenna arrived at the hospital and offered a company car so that she could get home. The girl agreed, nodded. She had no strength to go to the bus station at all. "You try to get some rest," he advised, carefully seating Jenna in the work jeep. "When you get home, sleep a little. And then, as time passes, don't forget to check in at our women's health clinic." The doctor was very caring and genuinely sympathetic to the girl, and seemed to be trying to do his best to ease her pain at least a little. "Andrew, when can he be picked up?" Jenna came to her senses in the car. "The body can be picked up from the morgue this afternoon, and the paperwork will be all ready. There's someone else there to take care of the funeral arrangements." The head doctor gently touched her arm. "Wouldn't you have to handle everything yourself? Andrew only has an old mom left. Clashed. No one else." "Well, clearly, you're trying to keep your cool after all." Having said that, the head doctor slammed the car door and briskly walked towards the hospital. And Jenna looked at his back and thought in her head, what a good doctor. Not that fat ear from the emergency room. What's the head doctor's name? Wow, she didn't ask, or he said it, and she just didn't remember it. Anyway, who cares what his name is? All the way to Moose Creek. Jenna cried quietly. The driver was silent, staring at the road. That's how they got there. At the house stood Betty, old woman, leaning against a tree, this stick instead of a cane, and waited to see what her daughter-in-law would say. Her mother knew at once from her look that something terrible had happened. It wasn't until Jenna said Andrew was dead. Betty fell. The mother's heart failed. Chuck took care of all the funeral arrangements for Andrew and Betty. The villagers all helped with money, except Peter. He, as soon as he learned that Andrew had died, ran to Jenna's house, shouting that now she must pay him back for repairing the tractor. The poor woman couldn't answer him. She just sobbed to her heart's content. What repair could she talk about now, when she had lost both her husband and her mother-in-law, who was like a mother to her? And Peter did not stop, threatened to sue. And only when Chuck grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and dragged him out into the yard to calm the moose a little. Mother-in-law. But who else would answer? He hissed to the glory of hands off. "I already did." Chuck answered quietly, "Although it wouldn't hurt to punch you in the face. All you think about is money. What a bastard you are. And if you think about it, Andrew died because of me." "What are you talking about, you idiot?" The farmer was indignant. "I drove him down that road. And you didn't pull the pipe out." Chuck agreed. "But we were all tired as dogs that day, and you drove it into the field. I was afraid of missing an extra penny, and we were fools to listen. Yeah, if it was Andrew, anyone could have been in our favor. Anyway, you're going to be a nuisance. You're sure you'll scare me?" The farmer grinned. "I've seen such hounds, and he'll come crawling back to me for a job, and I won't take it. You'll starve to death. I won't take it. After this, I'd rather die than work for you." Well, Peter nodded and left the yard, where there were still 2 coffin lids. Then there was a funeral and a wake. Jenna did not remember everything well, thanks to the neighbors and all the other villagers, supported as they could, as the young woman went through it all. It is hard to imagine how she did not lose her baby from the experience. It was also difficult to understand. But it was this tiny life that was just budding inside Jenna that probably gave her strength. But it was so bitter and painful. She had never told her husband that they were having a baby, had she? She hadn't had the time. And Betty hadn't been happy with the news. Now they would be angels protecting them on earth. A little time passed and the pain, a little subsided. It was time to move on. Jenna thought long and hard about what she should do. Maybe leave Moose Creek, where her stepfather wouldn't be happy to see her go. She didn't want to go back to her hometown. Except Moose Creek, she had no other place on earth where she could take refuge from all the hardships and carry her baby in peace. And only the shameless Peter circled over the young woman. Almost every day he showed up and reminded her of her duty. Jenna sincerely did not understand why she had to pay anything. Once she even tried to threaten the farmer that she would go to the police, to which he only laughed at the police, saying so forward, "My son-in-law is the boss and he'll deal with you. Where the hell did you come from? Maybe you ran away from your town, and there maybe you've been doing something else." What nonsense. Jenna was indignant. Maybe it's nonsense. My son-in-law will find something to pin on you. So sit tight and don't move and look for money, Peter told her. And then one day he showed up at her place at the end of May. "I've been thinking," he said, reclining in Betty's favorite chair. "What can't you really give me? After all, I have a proposition to make." "What is it?" Jenna asked cautiously. "Do you have something to please me?" Allude he. "A farmer." "Anyway, and you work a man's duty." "You're out of your mind," screamed Jenna. "Get out of my house. Look, don't fight it. I'm the boss. This is my land, my village. What I want is what I want. And if you don't, your house could suddenly burst into flames. It can happen with wiring and all that." Peter grinned impudently. "Take it. Do I like you? Really, why did you start talking? It's the grief that subsides. You're just kinder. It's okay. I'm calling you fat. Have you no shame?" Gasping with indignation, Jenna said, "Go away. If you don't want to do it the hard way, you'll have to do it the hard way." Peter stood up and went at her. Jenna shrank into the wall. The farmer grabbed her and pushed her onto the couch. "Please don't. I'm pregnant," she shrieked. That's what stunned Peter. "And silent. Nobody in the village knows. Not Andreevna, is it? Anyway, what do I care? I don't mind your belly at all. We don't know how it would have ended. It was just about that time." Jenna Chuck was walking by the house. He saw Peter coming through the window. The guy, without thinking, swung over the fence, ran into the house, and with one powerful punch sent the farmer to the far corner of the room. "Bastards," muttered Peter, rubbing his long jaw with his ears. "You're going to answer for everything. You, Chuck, will answer for the beatings tomorrow." "I'll write a report on you," shouted Jenna in tears. "Write it, you fool." The farmer shouted and left the house, slamming the door. And Jenna and Chuck sat for a long time, thinking about what to do next. Chuck, as promised earlier, was no longer working for the farmer. He now drove every day to the district center, found a job there in the processing plant forests. Chuck encouraged other men in the village to quit working for the unscrupulous farmer. But everyone had a shirt on his back. And where else would you find work? It's good from the bench, a car of your own, no family. Maybe they swear. What should they do? Wife's children live from their pennies, so all the other men continued to work for Peter. I understood the word that in this situation, everyone will not support Jenna. And not because they don't believe her, but simply because they are afraid of being left without means of subsistence. "Maybe you and I could move to the district center." Chuck suggested it. "All away from this creep, rent an apartment, and live together." Chuck liked Jenna, and lately he kept daring to talk to her. Now he had the chance. "Thank you, Chuck, but I can't do this. You see, I don't love you. You're a very good friend. And only I love Andrew, but he's gone. And you need to move on. I'm pregnant." Chuck, hearing this, looked at Jenna in surprise, and then suddenly knelt down in front of her and whispered hotly, "Jenna, honey, that's wonderful. Andrew is going to have a son. I'll take him in like I'm going to raise my own. And I'll never reproach you for anything. You trust me, Chuck. You're a good man. But I'm sorry, I can't do that, so please understand me." Chuck rose from his knees, sighed, nodded. In response, on the threshold, he turned around and said, "I understand, and you forgive me and know that I will always help you. Just tell me, Peter, don't worry. I think I know how to calm him down." And he left. Jenna locked the door with a strong deadbolt half the night. Then she didn't sleep. I wondered what was going to happen next. It was a little embarrassing to do that to Chuck, but she said honestly that she didn't love him. "What can your heart tell you?" "Nothing. We're small, we'll manage," she whispered, stroking her barely visible tummy. "Everything will be all right. Mommy and you and Daddy and Grandma are up there in heaven watching over us. They're always with us." The next evening, the farmer came to see Jenna again. Seeing him, Jenna turned pale in horror. Would all the things of yesterday happen again? Anyway, Peter said glumly, "I won't touch you anymore. Just live, but try not to show your face to me." He turned and walked away, leaving Jenna completely bewildered. What was it? Why had the farmer changed so suddenly? Didn't she know it was all Chuck? Every more or less large population center has its own landlord. And they're far from law-abiding citizens. Strange as that may seem, they are honored and respected by the local government. The police do not touch them, because these comrades are both patrons and sponsors, and small crooks help the police to find. There was a watchman in the neighborhood. That's where Chuck went. David was of age. He'd been around the block more than once. And now, settled in a distant district center, he was selling fruits and vegetables. He had several outlets. In between, he did good deeds for those in power, solving conflicts that people were afraid to go to the police with. Chuck got to him through the owner of the sawmill. Asked him to set him up, explained the situation. Apparently, very much to you. Here this woman, since you so in a closer look, noticed the owner. Her husband was a friend of mine. She's the only one who's pregnant now. And that old goat thought he could do whatever he wanted. The owner was a man, understanding and fair. He immediately contacted David, and in an hour Chuck was already at his place. The old Azeri's main values, despite his dubious past, were family and children. So he agreed to help calm the farmer down. After he left, he called the chief of police, listening and said, after greetings and duty words about the weather and personal life, "There's a kid here to see me about your father-in-law, complaining." He said, "What is Peter doing?" The chief of police is not to say that he did not know what was going on, but preferred to turn a blind eye to it. You see, the girl's all alone. It's hard on her, so let him get off her back. You remember how it was in the neighboring district of one owner of fields and farms? Cattle pestilence, or hay. His base burned down. He was hurting a poor orphan there too. They see everything up there and punish those who hurt the underprivileged. But do you understand me? The chief of police vowed to sensitize his father-in-law, and soon Peter was sitting in his son-in-law's office. What they talked about is unknown. Only the farmer left the office red as a cancer. And then he went home and talked to Jenna. Promised not to touch her. And he kept his word. Jenna exhaled. She didn't even believe that there wouldn't be any more upheaval. But there was. She lived quietly, worked in the club, regularly went to the women's counseling center, preparing to become a mother. Once in a while, Chuck would drop in for a visit. But they remained friends. Chuck never once again started a conversation about Jenna agreeing to be with him. He realized the young woman's heart was closed to him. Though he loved her sincerely, Chuck helped Jenna around the house. In August, he brought her wood coal, fixed the roof a little. In general, life went on as usual. In the district hospital, over time, began to forget the cases of death of a patient on the operating table. That's just the way it is, especially since in that case, it was not the doctor's fault. All the documents said so. And only the young surgeon knew how it was all really new and kept silent, because he could not change anything. He realized there was no point in fighting windmills. Rob was born and raised in this district center. He had dreamed of becoming a doctor since childhood. Yeah, but he realized he didn't have much of a chance. He came from a simple family. His mother was a store clerk, his father a bus driver. His parents couldn't teach him how to get into medical school for free. It's like going into space, a pipe dream. But there was a loud friend named Mike. We were in the same class. Mike was a hardcore C student who was a bully. He'd get into a fight with anyone. We had to fight. Where could I go? Mike's teachers never scolded his friends. And how could they? His parents are very respected people in the neighborhood. His father is the head doctor of a hospital. His mother, a colleague of a junior high school teacher. They turned a blind eye to Mike's shenanigans. But Rob was regularly called into the principal's office to find out who he was fighting with again. Why did he break a window or disrupt a lesson? Of course, Rob didn't break windows or press the bell in the hallway. He was just there for those moments. Mike did it. But what kind of friend does that? So Rob kept his mouth shut. And then he got the full measure of reprimands from teachers and reproaches from parents. Parents, by the way, all understood and scolded the son that the friend covers. Rob only said they were friends. I do not give away friends. Over the years, there were fewer such cases. Mike calmed down, and Rob became a diligent student in the 11th grade. When the question of his future profession came up, Rob honestly told his teachers that he dreamed of becoming a surgeon. He studied well, and of course, he could try. But the teachers only shrugged their shoulders in confusion. It would be hard to get in. Mike, looking at his friend, also said that he would be a doctor, and his teachers supported him. They said he would follow in his father's footsteps, and he would definitely get in for a fee. Right. You wanted to go to law school, Rob wondered. Or did your father insist? Yeah, it wasn't my dad's fault, Mike admitted. I just thought we should stick together. We're friends. Rob agreed. But I don't think I'll do the same thing, you'll see. Mike winked at him. Soon Rob and his parents were summoned to the head doctor, and Mike's father Alex offered to send him to medical school. It was much easier to enroll in it, and the hospital was obliged to pay the tuition. Of course, Rob and his parents happily agreed. Needless to say, Mike was also given the exact same referral. Rob passed the exams with flying colors. Mike somehow, but passed out of the competition on the target direction, and soon their student life began. They lived in the same dorm room and studied in the same group. Over the years, Mike got more seriously into his studies. But he found it difficult, unlike Rob. He could grasp it all on the fly. He'd also helped his friend and managed to help him write papers for exams. In short, the guys, by the time it was necessary to determine the specialization, were among the best students, and therefore one, as he dreamed, began to learn the subtleties of surgery. The other went into ideology. True, Mike's father often looked into the institute, inquired about his son's studies, and obviously his successes, supported financially. But no one complained, neither the teachers nor Mike himself. Rob studied by himself, achieved everything with his own head and hands. The years of study flew by unnoticed. On the search for a job, could not worry about the direction of places were provided in his native village. Moreover, there were also lifting allowances and payments under the program doctor. In short, the guys returned in high spirits. Rob's mood was a bit darkened when he was denied service housing as a young specialist. He lived with his elderly parents, but Mike was immediately given a 2-room apartment in a new and 3-story building in the center of the village. And it didn't matter that his parents had a 2-story mansion. Rob was a little hurt by this, but he didn't let it bother him. He realized that living in his parents' house would help his father and mother more. And Mike would look after their health. What's there to compare? The head doctor will do anything for his son. And so the workday began. It turned out that the load on the surgical department was decent. Although the village people have all sorts of problems happened, and simple operations did Rob in more complicated. He wasn't afraid of hardship, and his hands were golden. But the cripple was a quitter. Although he was lucky in the department, he had a partner, Ethan, a geologist, already a doctor of years. Rob was the only surgeon on the ward, and it was a huge workload. But Rob wasn't in the habit of complaining. Even though another surgeon was expected soon. It's okay, he can handle it. He'll be patient. That spring evening, a young man was brought in by ambulance after an accident. They said he had overturned in the tractor. Multiple contusions, fractures. Suspicion of internal bleeding required urgent diagnosis. Rob notified the chief medical officer immediately. Probably need an airlift, since the Alex patient was a heavy drinker that night. The wife was celebrating an anniversary at a restaurant with many guests. The chief physician listened to the doctor and said, "Mole, do not panic prematurely at first to try to cope with their own forces." And there, as you can see, will be. There was another difficulty. That very night, and at the stadium, Ethan himself went down with hypertensive crisis and lay in the neighboring therapy under the drip. Mike had to be summoned immediately. The chief physician tensed up. What is Ethan thinking up? Let him go and work. His blood pressure is 220/180. What kind of worker is he? Rob objected. Send Mike to the hospital. He's already drunk. How could he? Rob was indignant. He knew Ethan was sick this afternoon. I told him not to drink, to be his backup. Why are you so angry? Rob? Alex grinned. I'm the head doctor, and I'm amazed who should rest and who should work. Mike has a well-deserved day off. He has the day off. And I don't know what it is at all. Rob's angry. But it doesn't matter now. A man could die. In that case, call for an airlift now. We need an emergency operation. Okay, Mike is coming, but he's had half a glass of wine. I'll allow it. And soon Mike showed up at the hospital glum, angry, and pretty drunk. You're gonna do anesthesia like that? Rob gasped. And I won't allow it. Don't you get it? Mike grinned, preparing for surgery. You don't want to go to the stadium. Well, you do what you want. And he wanted to leave the department. When the head doctor showed up, also angry and drunk, spoiling the whole party, he said to Rob in a baleful glare, "Do you know how much it costs? I'll get a chip off my back if it's nothing serious. They'll take away my bonus. But it's a serious case," said Rob. "We'll get to the bottom of it. Mike, take care of the patient now." The head doctor commanded and turned to Rob. "And you go, get ready for the operation. Don't talk too much." Rob realized that he was in a trap. On the one hand, he had to save the patient. And on the other hand, how could a fallen colleague be allowed back to work? But after all, the chief medical officer was now in charge. So Rob went to the operating room. The guy was already on the table. Mike had given him the anesthetic. "Give it to him," he grinned. "He's out anyway." "You're a fool. Just told him Rob on the vitals." "Look." And then the tech banned nastily. The patient's heart had stopped. All resuscitative measures were performed, but the heart could not be restarted. It was afterwards, when Rob was sitting on the floor in despair right in front of the surgical table. The head doctor walked into the operating room, threw a glance up his nose, falling asleep at his son's window, then swooped down on Rob. "Was this your fault?" hissed the doctor. "You endangered the patient." The nurse, who was nearby all the time, could not keep silent and stood up in defense of the surgeon. Rob hadn't done anything yet when his heart stopped, and I can confirm. "Confirm, you say?" the head doctor said slowly. "That's good. In fact, I advise everyone to keep quiet. The patient died because a clot broke off. Do you know that without an autopsy?" Rob asked tiredly and turned his gaze to the bass floating already on the window mic. "I think Sarkozy's mistake." "Silence, silence," hissed the chief physician. "If you want to stay in the profession, then do not even dare to think like that. My son is not guilty of anything." "Understood. If you come forward, they'll blame you and your nurse too. You want to see if it works." And he left with his son. Rob sat next to the dead patient, staring at one point. "Nastya, these are the first deaths I've ever had." Slowly, he said. "You don't know how hard it is? It's even harder to realize that it might not have been." "How can you go against the head doctor?" sighed the nurse. "He has a friend in the regional ministry. He'll eat you up, won't he?" "Me too." "Rob, let's keep quiet. We haven't done anything. If everything comes to light, it'll be without us. Otherwise, we'll be dead." "Do you think it will?" Rob grinned. "The pathologist will write what's required. You've already figured it out. How am I supposed to work here? By gritting your teeth. You've forgotten that you have to work off the referral and the 1 million that you've been given and haven't been given yet. Besides, nobody's going to get that guy back." Rob nodded tiredly in response and secretly did not go outside the surgical department. The relatives of the dead guy believed the doctors, and no one was looking into the situation. Well, the patient died. It happens. Every doctor, unfortunately, has his own little cemetery. Rob continued to work in the department. Their friendship with Nicholas was over in a flash. But Mike was not particularly worried, not for the lost friend, not for the guy who died on the operating table. He worked as before. And even at the end of the summer, he was awarded some ministerial diploma as an excellent specialist. Ethan, having recovered from his illness, returned to the ward. He knew about everything, of course, but he kept quiet too. Only once he whispered to Rob, "Don't worry, one day they'll answer for everything. In the meantime, do your job. I'll always be there for you." And indeed, in all the difficult cases in the future, Ethan was at his post. And Mike, despite all the accolades and honors, didn't do his job right. But no one said a word to him, as it was more expensive to contact the head doctor. And in September, Mike suddenly went to the mountains, and it was nothing that he had not yet worked the allotted time and had already received his 1,000,000. Dad found him a better place in the ministry. Alex just realized that he had to hide his son Put him away. What if this story comes out one day, and since Cole will be gone, everyone will forget? In place of Mike soon arrived Benjamin Serious Man, who had previously worked in a military hospital, and with him his wife. The surgeon Emily was just as good as her husband. Rob exhaled a little. He could relax a little, because he was always on duty for their operation. He realized he was about to lose his mind. With Benjamin and Emily, they even became friends. The spouses invited their colleague to visit, told interesting cases from practice. Rob wondered how, with such experience, they suddenly came to such a backwoods for money. Emily honestly admitted, "Yes, and a little want to rest. It's easier in the village hospital anyway. Easier when you have helpers." Rob grinned. "Well, you have me now." Emily laughed. "And I don't like it at your place. I just don't understand what kind of a fruit your head doctor is. It seems so all right and polite in the eyes smiles. I feel like I have to be careful with him. Is that right?" Only I nodded to Rob and said nothing more. The couple just looked at each other. There was another reason Benjamin and Emily had come here. In a remote village lived Benjamin's mother, an old woman. How many times Benjamin convinced her to move in with them? It was useless with Emily. Her mother kept saying she would never leave home. I had to accept it. They decided to move closer to her. Everything would be under supervision. One day, in early October, she called Benjamin and complained that the stove was smoking a little. Maybe a brick had fallen off or soot had clogged the chimney. Benjamin was free that day, and Emily had no duty. Leaving his wife with his 12-year-old daughter, he drove to the village. As it turned out, the match was fine. It's just that the old mother overdid it a little too much and clogged up the whole stack. Once again, Benjamin started a song saying, "Mom, let's go to live with us," but she just waved back. Benjamin got into the car to go to the district center and could not start the engine. To leave this village, another mode of transport, where there were only 7 yards, it was problematic. Tomorrow morning was work time. Benjamin tried to call a cab, but the neighborhood drivers said that they would not go to such a remote area off-road for any money. And it's slushy outside. Who wants to wash their car afterwards? So Benjamin called Rob. "I can come and get you to the service station," Rob agreed. "But I'm on duty." "If they replace you, I can be alone with my daughter, who is not a little girl anymore." Benjamin asked hopefully, "I don't know what to do." Rob agreed. And so at the 7th hour of the evening, he left the district center on the road one way should take about an hour. Rob calculated that he should be back by 10 o'clock. The road out of the district center was smooth, but soon the asphalt ran out, and the car ran, cursing the local roads. Rob continued on his way. He passed some village, turned in its direction. This way he could get to Benjamin's mom's village faster. Rob noted to himself the strange logic of the local authorities. They put a bus stop right on the highway, and people have to walk 2 kilometers to get home. Who came up with that? He doesn't ride buses himself. And then he saw a young woman walking towards the village, carefully avoiding the puddles. She was carefully hugging her huge belly. Rob decided to stop. "Young lady, let me drive you," he offered and opened the door. "Get in the parlor." "Thank you," the stranger said confusedly. "But I better walk, or I'll moralize all the carpets in the car." And she nodded at her shoes, earned by dirt from mine, smiled Rob. "Sit down. And how does your husband let you go in this position?" The woman answered nothing, only sighed. Then she nodded and sat down. "Careful in the parlor. Where are you coming from so late?" Rob asked. "When did they get off the bus?" "I had an appointment at the clinic today," I said. Rob shook his head. She didn't answer anything, but nodded again. Soon they came to an old cottage that the woman pointed out. After thanking her, she got out and headed into the yard. Rob pulled off after a few meters. He realized something was wrong with the tire. He got out, looked around for a nail or gravel. "Empty tire. You got a problem." I called out to him the other day for a lesson, who was standing in the yard watching Rob's actions. She had a flat tire. Rob shouted to her, "It's all right, I'll fix it." He got the spare. The jack had to work faster. It's getting dark in the fall, and Benjamin's waiting. And he's off shift. What if the head doctor decides to check it out? It's not working on his time. It's no big deal. But Alex doesn't like him. Since sometime, like he dislikes him. Soon the job was done. Rob put the punctured tire in the trunk and looked puzzled at his hands. How would they be washed now? He didn't notice the recent po' boy coming up to him. Let's go to my house, suggested that she understand what this was all about. You'll clean yourself up. Have some tea. You must be tired from working on the wheel. Thank you, of course. But I have to go, Rob said. My colleague is waiting for me. He waited longer and will wait another 15 minutes. The woman smiled. Then the village is about 10 minutes away. Let's go inside. Where are you going with such dirty hands? Yes, you should take care of your hands. I agree, Rob smiled back. The house was simple, too simple. There was poverty in the place. An old, though neatly beaten stove, an old kitchen table covered in cracks. Clearly spiraled a solid anniversary. As Rob washed his face, he realized the woman lived alone. A single toothbrush stood on a shelf. Just the woman's cheap shampoos. The woman. Meanwhile, she warmed the kettle, pulled out some jam. Try some, she smiled at Rob. It's the first time I've cooked strawberries myself this year. Oh no, I'm still going. Try it, please, as if to ask, she said. I should be able to thank you for your help. All right, Rob agreed. For some reason, he felt sorry for this sweet, young mother-to-be who lived alone in the middle of nowhere. Go ahead, strawberries are my favorite and mine. My name is Jenna, by the way, Rob. He sat down at the table. From drank tea, delicious tea, praised Rob. I don't get that familiar flavor. How is it delusional? Jenna smiled. I like it too, and Andrew liked it a lot. Where is he? Careful, asked Rob. Why are you alone? Dead. He rolled over on a tractor this spring. Died in the hospital. Jenna said bitterly and looked away. Rob followed her gaze. Jenna was looking at the wall next to the kitchen cabinet. There in a frame was a small picture. Rob's hand trembled involuntarily when he saw who was in the picture. He recognized the guy who had died from the wrong anesthesia. Yeah, and Jenna was just talking about a car accident and dying in the hospital. And that was definitely in the spring. Is that your husband? Rob asked quietly. Yes, he still couldn't forgive himself for letting him go that morning. Andrew didn't even know we were having a baby. And Jenna told him about the fires, about the men's work, and Rob listened, not knowing where to put his eyes. He felt bad about the whole situation. He could have done something for the poor guy, but he couldn't, and now his widow was sitting there, pouring her heart out. You should know who she's been pouring tea for all this time. Rob secretly thought she was responsible for Andrew's death. She should have called the region directly, argued, demanded. Let them deal with it later. But it could have saved the guy's life. You can't bring back the past, he finally said. Do not worry, so you now need to think about the child. I whispered. Jenna wipes away the tears. Otherwise, I'd go crazy. I'm sorry I'm not telling you my funny story. I mean, you've got things to do, and I'm running late. And I'll be traveling absent-mindedly, Rob nodded. You stay here, and I'll leave you my phone number. You call me if you need anything. What if I do? But what if you get sick? I can come to the hospital, take you away. Thank you, but I think I can handle it. I'm used to dealing with my own problems. Life has taught me that. Rob wrote his phone number on a piece of paper, thanked her for the delicious tea and jam, and walked briskly outside. Turned around at the car window, he saw the slim figure of Jenna, hugging her huge belly too, and a new wave of shame came over him. Running away, cowardly running away. This girl clearly needed help. What can he do? All the way given. He mentally reasoned only about it. At the end, he decided. One of these days, he'll come to do some more chores. What will help? Winter's coming. What do we need to fix in the house? Benjamin was glad to see a colleague, but Benjamin's mom wouldn't let them go. She fed them dinner, gathered pickles and jam for her son, and gave Rob a couple of jars. He didn't have to convince her he didn't need any. His mom makes his own winter food too. Where's it going? The old woman wouldn't hear of it. This hotel only asked to return the containers later. Yes, my mother is like that, Benjamin said with a smile as they left the house. She's used to tending to her vegetable garden and you can't move her. I'm hooked on this house. What can you do, visiting her like this? She must be very happy to have you back in the neighborhood. She is. Well, I'm thinking it's time to settle down myself. I'm happy with the hospital. It's just Alex is a little stressful. I get the feeling he's a tricky one. He is. It's best not to mess with him, Rob advised. Benjamin gave him a questioning look. Once again, the young colleague didn't say anything about the head doctor, although he obviously knew something. Benjamin couldn't get him to talk. They quickly put a rope on Benjamin's car and set off on their way back. They were home by 0 o'clock. Rob quickly changed his clothes and rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, everything went without incident that night. 2 days passed, and all the while Rob's mind was still reeling from the encounter with the unfortunate young widow. How was she? She's due to give birth in about a month. She's all alone. How did he know? Yes, he really wanted to go and see her. And at the same time, he felt a great guilt for the girl, because her husband had died in front of him. Finally, his legitimate day off, he decided to do it. It was Saturday, a sunny and even warm day for October. Rob's car was steadily going along the already known road. Now he drove more carefully, remembering the broken tire. Here was a familiar village, that old house. Rob stopped at the gate. He got out of the car and looked into the yard lad and the dog of the council, barking, warning his guest that he's the boss. Hi, buddy. Where's your mistress? Rob said and cautiously made the gate, not knowing whether the chain would reach the gate or not. It was interesting, the first time he didn't notice the dog. The guard had slept through the guests then. 3. It's a mess. What are you yelling about? Rob hears Jenna's voice from behind a dilapidated gray ear. Who's here to see us? In a minute, Jenna came out of the corner of the barn with a bucket of carrots in her hands. Oh, hello, it's you. A little embarrassed, Jenna. You're on your way to a friend's house again. No, I'm on other business today. Rob was embarrassed for some reason, but then he realized it. Why are you carrying such heavy things? You're not supposed to give it to me. It's small. Jenna smiled. It's time to dig the carrots anyway. So you're doing it yourself. Who else? Jenna shrugged. And tell me you dig your own potatoes too. No, the potatoes helped. Neighbors removed a little bit, and carrots I can and myself. So give me the bucket. Where to? There's more. Rob took the bucket and looked at the girl questioningly. Yes, under the shed, Jenna waved toward the house. There's plenty more carrots. I only dug a meter of the bed. Carrots were born this year. Sadly, sighed Jenna. Now we'll do it quickly. Oh, why the inconvenience? You were going about your business. Rob didn't explain anything. He just dumped the carrots where Jenna had indicated. Then he took a determined step forward toward the barn. Then he stopped, nodded his head, saying, Bring in the landlady. Soberly at this time realized that the guest was not going to take anything, rumbled unhappily, hid in the doghouse. Jenna smiled embarrassedly, shrugged again, and led the assistant to the vegetable garden. Rob, the country boy digging carrots, knows carefully not to cut. When he lifted the rare, worn on the carrots, and then deftly pulled out and gently tossed to the side, Jenna tried to help, but Rob immediately pointed out another job for her, bringing a small stool that stood by the water barrel and bucket. The buckets with the large root vegetables were filling up fast. Rob only had time to carry them under the shed. In the meantime, they chatted with Jenna. Rob told her a story from his childhood, how he and a friend had climbed into the school garden to pick radishes. In the evening, when the school watchman had gone home on business, climbed over the fence and pulled pockets full. Then there was a snooze under the poppy column. Ate while sitting in the slabs by the house under construction. It was so good. And most importantly, I still don't know why we needed that radish, Rob said with a laugh. We had radishes growing in our gardens, and much better. Big, sweet radishes. That one was small and bitter. But no, we had to steal it and eat it. As they say, vinegar is sweet for free. Smiling, Jenna suggested. Probably, agreed Rob. I think the desire to steal something at least once appears in a child. Jenna remembered. I used to carry sorrel with the girls. For some reason, none of them grew much. But on an abandoned farmstead where no one lived, for 10 years it grew for 10 years. So we'll get together with our girlfriends. No worse than you. We look around. Then we crawl across the street to get there. We tear it up quickly and run away. He's no cleaner than Willie, but he's not ours. Mom says not to take other people's stuff, but I want to. Rob, smiling, nodded back, working the shovel and glancing at Jenna and sitting on the stool. Now in the sunlight he saw on her face cute, slightly noticeable freckles. Nose slightly pulled out, eyes so big and blue like that sky stubbornly, and Sasha's blonde curls were always trying to pop out from under a thin kerchief, and Jenna always corrected them with her thin hand. She was also thin, graceful, like a girl. And only her big belly was a reminder that she was about to become a mom. Jenna, can I ask you a question? Rob let go of the shovel for a moment and looked at the girl carefully. Why are you here? You're talking about your mom. She lives far away. Maybe you'd better go to her now. It's hard to have a baby all by yourself. My mom is really far away. Jenna was a little slow and continued very far away. She died when I was finishing school. My stepfather managed to take over her house. He's a bad man. I ran away from him to the city. Then I met Andrew, but God didn't let us stay together much longer. Anyway, no more on Earth. I ain't got no home now except here in Moose Creek. I'm sorry, is that hard for you to remember? Oh, it's all right. It's all right. It's just the way things are. Moose Creek is a good place to live too. I have a job here. I'm on maternity leave. I'm gonna go back to my club. Where do you work? I tell you all about me. I don't know anything about you. I'm confused. Rob, are you a doctor at the hospital? No, I'm in charge of fire safety on the administrative side. Rob answered. And with renewed vigor, he started pulling out the carrots. He didn't want to admit he was a surgeon. She was bound to ask him about the Andrew case. Didn't he do the surgery? And then it would be harder to lie. Otherwise, he's just an administrative assistant. Rob liked this girl and didn't want to. Bringing up unpleasant topics to nurse her wounds. Are you married? Just asking Jenna. Anything else? No, it didn't work out. Strangely enough, Jenna shrugged and smiled embarrassedly. I'm sorry, I don't understand. You're such a distinguished, respectable man. I'm alone. Isn't there a decent girl in your hospital? There are girls, Rob grinned, just not the right ones. No, don't get me wrong, I'm normal. I just want to meet the right one. I haven't met one at school yet. I thought I had. We were friends for a long time. She was in the same class as me. Then she thought I wasn't promising. She found herself a son of rich parents in the city now. Probably married him. Rob continued to work in silence, remembering his story. He'd started dating Molly during his freshman year, and their relationship didn't interfere with his studies. Molly was from the city, but she often ran away to their house, as much as she did in the dorms. At such times, Mike would tactfully withdraw. Rob thought it was true love. And then he saw Molly being driven to the institute in an expensive car by a stylishly dressed guy. He opened the door, kissed her gently goodbye. Molly didn't expect Rob to be on the porch at the time and see everything. He thought she'd start making excuses. She was embarrassed at first, but she came up to him and said so simply, "But you realized it was over between us." Rob nodded calmly in response, though there was a storm in his soul. I wanted to shout some nasty things, maybe even hit him. Probably Molly was expecting some kind of hysterics from him, and that's why she was even disappointed. I mean, he's not the least bit jealous. He doesn't care. You're a beggar scum, and you always will be. She shouted at him, and I deserve better. Rob wished her happiness, turned around and walked away. That was the first time he'd missed an important lecture, got drunk in a bar, and then it all went away. He got it. What's next? It's nothing. She doesn't deserve what he's going through. And before graduating from the institute, they no longer communicated and pretended that they did not even know each other, although they studied at the same course. Molly came to the graduation ceremony. You will go to your village. With a sneer, she asked, "In the village." Rob answered her and went to his classmates. She failed to get him, and they never saw each other again. And that story is long in the past. Only now Rob is very careful in choosing girls, even shuns them. But Jenna was the exception. Yes, in the beginning, he was driven by the desire to simply help the unhappy widow, because he was indirectly responsible for the death of her husband. That's what he thought. But now, talking to Jenna in the vegetable garden just like that, he realized that he really liked this simple young woman and someone else's child. It didn't embarrass him in the slightest. All these thoughts swirled in his head as he wielded the shovel. Jenna, realizing what had hit a sore subject, also remained silent as if apologizing. Then they gathered nets under the dry carrots. And when the work was done, Jenna suggested that Rob come inside for a snack. "It was as if I knew that I would have guests today," the girl admitted. Such a cooked borscht, and really was good, as well as pancakes, with the same strawberry jam. And there was also a delicious coda with cooking. As if apologizing, said Jenna, "Eat? You do not think that I am so pro-fat just cooking love. I forget to eat in the kitchen. I cook, it happens. And then I sit down and think why. Who's good to have a good appetite? 3. Do you have a great dog? Yes, but he's old now. Mama Valia said that about 15 years he is decent, but not critical," smiled Rob. "Noblemen can live up to 20 years. And with good care, how do you have even more?" Afterwards, he thanked his mistress and began to say goodbye. "Rob, I still did not understand why you came to me." "Not to dig carrots." Jenna looked him in the eye. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. I just wanted to help you." "And you see how lucky I was," Rob said honestly. And immediately added and decided, "Consider me your friend. Let's use the first name." "You don't mind?" "I don't mind." Barely blushing, Jenna replied. "That's great," Rob smiled. "So you have my phone number then. Call me anytime. I'll come over as soon as I can. I'll help you with whatever you need." "Thanks, but no thanks. But don't think I'm some kind of sick, crazy person. I just want to help you. But who else in this village will help you? It's probably just old ladies. There are young people, but not many, and they all have their own concerns. I had a good assistant friend, Andrew, but it's been a month since Chuck left for the north. The pay is better there. Now I'll be instead of Glory." Rob laughed. They went outside the gate and stood talking. Suddenly, at high speed, Abdallah's truck passed them on the road. Speeding away went on. The freak swore, "Rob fears in the dust. Can't you drive any quieter? He's specifically near my house." "Is he speeding up?" Jenna sighed. "It's the farmer Andrew used to work for, getting revenge. He's getting revenge on me." "For what?" Rob wondered. "Andrew wrecked his new tractor. He then demanded money from me for repairs, and soon he seemed to calm down. And then he had a bad harvest and never fixed his tractor. That's why he's so angry." "No, he doesn't touch me, but he does bad things. He's always driving his car around my house. That's good. My laundry's not drying today. Sometimes he drives by, and I'm walking. He's a fool. We've got to teach him a lesson. Yeah, he'll probably calm down. I don't want to mess with him anymore." Jenna lowered her eyes, remembering the sordid scene when Peter had shown up at her door that spring evening. "Thank God he's back off. His nastiness says what a rotten man he is. I can't help it. All right, well, you call me if you need anything." Rob waved goodbye and got in the car. Jenna waved back. And then, looking after the deleting, learning machines thought strange. Why? Was a friend coming over? No, he's obviously not a bad person, but it's just unusual. Yesterday, he was a complete stranger. And today, they were digging together so easily in the vegetable garden, chatting, joking, sad, really friendly and cute. God, what am I thinking about? I have someone to take care of and love. And Jenna looked down at her tummy and went out into the yard. Yeah, weird meeting. Strange talk, like the man wanted to say something else but didn't dare. Or maybe Chuck asked him to look after her when he left and he was worried about her being here alone. But he couldn't do anything else. The sawmill's in trouble and money's needed. My mother's been sick since the bench. So I went to the north. Is that Chuck's friend? But Rob didn't say a word about him. No, they don't know each other. It was just a coincidence that she met another good person in her life. Rob drove home and smiled contentedly. He had really enjoyed today. He'd worked and socialized. And once again, he was convinced that Jenna is a wonderful human being who now seems to care about him. And 3 days later, Rob called Jenna. He had just gotten out of the hospital and was on his way home. How come all of a sudden this call? I could hear in her voice that she was very excited. Rob, please tell me, do you know a veterinarian or doctor who can help an animal? I mean, you work at the hospital. What's wrong? Rob stopped, realizing that something serious had happened. And Jenna could barely hold back the tears. Distress, sobbing into the phone. At first, I thought he was just bored. He wouldn't eat anything. Then he started vomiting. Then my neighbor across the street lives across the street. She came and said she saw Peter last night cutting off a piece over the fence. He must have poisoned him. And I can't do anything. I poured egg in his mouth. I gave him kefir. It's no use. He's lying there like a rag. So don't worry, I'll be right there. Rob answered briefly. On the way, he ran into a pharmacy, bought the necessary medicines and supplies, warned his parents that he would be home late. Those thought that the son stayed at the duty again. They just sighed heavily. Yeah, he picked their Rob to do the job. If they'd known, they'd have discouraged him from going to medical school. And Rob was already speeding down the dirt road toward Moose Creek. Good thing the dirt below Falcon was still light. He got there fast. Jenna was in the yard next to the joke, soberly sorted out, and inside, in no way did not want to come out of there, only trembled a small shiver. Soon the learned stools definitely threw poison. He asked Jenna. Grandma Gallia could not lie. Swore that she saw him a piece of meat or what? Threw, cut off fool such and happily grabbed it. Wiping her tears, said Jenna, Rob, are you good at this? Can you help him? Rob only nodded in response. Sure, he's a human doctor, but the causes of disease are about the same for everyone. Only how do you tell Jenna he's a surgeon when he's already lied to her about his specialty? Jenna, I know what I'm doing. He answered briefly, turning on the porch light so I could see better. And go inside, we'll handle this. If he bites you, he doesn't know you. And if he bites you, Rob answered a little sharply. And anyway, he's in such a state now that he can't open his mouth. Go on. I know how to handle dogs. And that was the truth. Rob had been an avid dog person since he was a kid. There were always dogs in his parents' yard. For years, there was a noble dog named Jack. Rob picked him up on the street in first grade and took care of him for many years. Only recently, Jack died of old age. Rob found the Dachshund freezing in a snowdrift in the 8th grade. And he brought it out himself. She was still Rob's mom's favorite and faithfully guarded her slippers in the hallway. In the yard now lived Charlie the half-breed sheepdog. Dad brought him home from work. Probably if he hadn't become a surgeon, Rob would have really gone into veterinary medicine. He carefully pulled the dog on a chain out of the kennel. The trainer didn't resist, just looked at the man pitifully, saying, "What are you going to do with me?" However, he was so bad that it seemed that death would already be a deliverance. "It looks like you're really torn up," Rob said, examining the dog, and he carefully began all the manipulations. An hour later, he went into the house, silently washed his hands and wiped them with a towel. Jenna sat at the kitchen table and looked at him questioningly anxious. "Will she die?" Finally, she asked. "I can't tell yet," Rob admitted honestly. "We'll have to watch. I've done lavage. I've given antidote shots. I just don't know what kind of poison it is. We'll have to do tests, of course. I wish we could do an ultrasound, but our veterinarians in the district center have no equipment. Anyway, let's hope the shots will help. I'll do something else for him in the morning." "In the morning?" Jenna asked and blushed a little. "And when it's too late to drive back, I'll style you in the gym." "Yeah, I can do it in the car, and that's not the point. I just have more shots in the morning. I don't want you to go near him. He'll come back. He'll hurt you." "Thanks, Rob." Jenna looked at him with grateful eyes. "I'm sorry I pulled out on you, but I was so scared. There was no one else to call. And you were right to call. If I didn't know you were an office worker, I'd think you were a doctor. You were so good at it. I've seen you out the window, dialing medications. Giving shots like a pro, Jenna admitted. We are office workers, the same kind of embarrassment, smiled Rob. In fact, I've got such a hand on my pets. To himself, he thought, you've never been so close to failure. Afterward, they had dinner. Jenna didn't cook anything serious, as she said herself, just a salad. She spared the potatoes, but it was so good. Rob was once again convinced what a good hostess Jenna was. And then lying on the couch, Rob thought that something should be done about that farmer, but what could he do? For what? Report him to the police. And you can prove he gave the dog that stuff. Even if the neighbor confirms it, it is not a fact that someone in the countryside will seriously deal with it and the police only twist the temples. But if they beat you up, it's Rob they'll have to deal with. He doesn't want that, but you can't leave it like that. If the farmer's gone from petty mischief to sabotage, there's no telling what'll happen next. He clearly hates Jenna, and that hatred is only growing. So Rob hasn't figured out how to help. He fell asleep. He woke up at 6:00 a.m. and immediately went out to see his four-legged patient. 3, tied up from the evening. Met him on the doorstep, standing confidently on his paws. When he saw Rob, he even wagged his tail. Best you astray, smiled Rob. Right then, you and I have done everything right. He stroked the dog's head. In response, the animal licked his hand tentatively, then looked faithfully into his eyes. Yes, he remembered. This man is a rescue. He's good, he's his own. And it's okay. I won't give him a shot, he rejoiced to the landlady, who was already bustling in the kitchen. You put it in his drink, only adding the medicine I'll leave. I wrote it on the bottles. How many drops? 3 days, and call me if you need anything. I'm on my way. Jen is so confused. We'll figure out breakfast. I don't have to get home, change for work. You know, I'm an office worker. I have to be dressed up at all times. Rob smiled ironically. Jenna saw him off and wondered. Something Rob was hiding from her. 3 followed her mistress, following happily by squealing howls as if she wanted to say something. Probably that she and Jenna had made a good friend. Rob made it home and to work on time. The day went by with the usual patient business. In the evening, he was on call, and it wasn't until close to bedtime that he texted Jenna. How was she doing? It was as if Jenna was waiting to hear from him. Immediately, she replied that he was quite well, enjoying life. Probably put him on a chain tomorrow, just like you did. I texted Rob tomorrow morning for your hospital appointment. I'm fine. Good night, answered Jenna. Rob only smiled. Good night. It would be nice, but there is no telling what kind of night it will be. And it is very important that Jenna will be at the polyclinic tomorrow. He doesn't have an appointment, won't meet. I wouldn't want her to see him in a white coat. No, he will tell her everything. But a little later. Yes, he'll tell her everything later. She'll understand him, she'll believe him. Rob at least hoped so. Afterwards, he decided to find information about Paul. Jenna had told him briefly about him. I would have liked more. In social networks, Rob found his page, looked at it, remembered the picture. We'll have to figure out how to reason with the pissed-off farmer. The night passed quietly. In the morning, Rob hurried home to avoid meeting Jenna, and just a couple days later, there was an unexpected meeting. Rob was at an appointment at the clinic when a large elderly man literally burst into his office. "Doctor, save me." "I must be dying," with a pleading voice, he muttered and immediately started tearing off his shirt. So the sick man, "Don't panic. First of all, explain what you have happened." The elderly nurse, Kate, spoke sternly instead of the doctor. "I have a huge tumor and it hurts," complained the patient. "Rob, take a look," asked the nurse and looked surprised at the doctor, who was staring at the patient from America. Rob could not believe his eyes. It was the same Peter, the poisoner from Jenna's life. So he's sick. "Yeah, sure, I'll take a look." Rob nodded. "Show me." On Peter's back was a huge lump the size of a chicken egg, red-blue in color. Rob realized at a glance. It was a simple one from Rob that could be opened and removed immediately in the dressing room. Complicated case. Slowly, he said sleepily, ignoring the surprised look from Nurse Kate. "Prepare the instruments. Let's go remove it." "Right there, sick. What if it's cancer?" "What if I die after your manipulation?" "You're not gonna die, at least not anytime soon. If, of course, you live in accord with your conscience. I've seen these formations. They occur in people who've done a lot of evil. Admit it. Have you ever done anything bad to anyone?" "I have. I can see it in your eyes." Now it's materializing in the form of these abscesses. Now both the nurse and the patient were looking at him in amazement. Rob was on a roll. "My grandmother was a hereditary witch doctor, and she used to tell me about such things. Anger builds up in a person, and then it comes out. Of course, I'll delete everything. Only a new one will appear. If you continue to do nasty things, you'll do them." Rob spoke clearly and confidently, looking into the eyes of the patient, as if hypnotizing him. And he was like a rabbit in front of a boa constrictor. "I won't." Almost crying, Peter replied, "Doctor, help me. I can't take it anymore. I admit I've sinned sometimes. I won't do it again." Kate was already putting away her tools, a little unsure of what was going on. Maybe Rob had gotten a little too worked up. She decided not to get involved just yet and just do her job. Rob opened up the abscess pretty quickly, did what he needed to do. And as the nurse was dressing it, whispered in the patient's ear, "Believe it or not, I have a gift. I can sometimes see what's going to happen to a person. I got it from my grandmother." Well, if you hurt a young woman, you're going to get bumps like this all the time. I don't know what kind of woman she is, but I see that she's pregnant and will give birth soon. When Peter heard that, he howled. "Understood, doctor, I won't." After leaving the office, he thanked the doctor profusely for both the work and the warning. Kate was still under the impression of what had happened. "Rob, what was that?" Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "What grandmother? What sores? What kind of nonsense were you talking about?" "Nonsense indeed," Rob smiled. "I made it all up, and it turned out to be plausible. It's just that this man is really hurting a friend of mine, and I've been trying to figure out how to get him to back off. And then he came to me. It was a sin not to take advantage of such an opportunity." "Yes, you buried your talent for acting," the nurse laughed. "Even I, the old fool, believed it. Kate, you're far from stupid and you're a very good professional. I also know that you are very decent. Please don't tell anyone about this case. Or what if the patient reaches the point of disbelief in Rob's predictions?" Winked slyly at the nurse. "Absolutely not. I'm sure, Kate. It's all for a good cause. That's why I'm a grave." That's how Rob solved the problem with Peter. He really stopped bothering Jenna. And after reading online, he even found confirmation of the doctor's words. There really is such a thing. You do evil, and it shows up on you. He'd already promised not to hurt Jenna. Debt forgiven. He was just trying to do a little mischief. See how that worked out. Well, he didn't need Jenna. Rob's parents began to suspect that their son was having an affair with a girl. He was often away, rooting. One day, his father asked him directly when his son would introduce his mother to his chosen one. Rob only smiled in response. If parents knew how complicated everything was. It's been almost a month now. How he has been communicating with Jenna. They are just friends and still hasn't said who he really is. And the further it gets, the harder it's proving to be. That November morning, Rob was resting after a night on duty. Outside the window, it was snowing mixed with rain, slushy, cold outside, but at home it was warm with a warm plaid blanket. Rob was immersing himself in sweet rhyme, as suddenly he was literally pulled from the embrace of morphine. The phone rang. It was Jenna. "Rob, I'm sorry to bother you, but I don't know what to do." He heard her voice in the receiver. Jenna spoke quickly, with a kind of tear in her voice. Rob realized she was in labor. "Rob, the ambulance says it can't get through. The road's a muddy mess. They came, but they said they'd have to walk to the highway, and I'm in labor." And without panic answered Rob as I got dressed. At what intervals the contractions I did not catch. A little surprised answered Jenna. "Well, 10-15 minutes there is a break. This is just the beginning. There's still time. I'll figure out what to do, and you get ready little by little. Maybe it's just a precursor. You still have 2 weeks to go." Rob said, "I don't know. Jenna exclaimed pitifully. Again, I'm sorry you're stressed out. Stop apologizing. Calm down and wait. Everything's going to be fine. And Rob skipped out of the house. Mom and Dad heard the whole conversation and just looked at each other. Someone's giving birth to their son. He's in a different specialty. What's the son hiding from them? Rob was already driving his car to Moose Creek. He realized that only a crawler tractor could get through that mud. It's a couple of kilometers from Moose Creek to the trailhead. Where to find a Caterpillar tractor? Rob called Benjamin on the way and told him everything. The colleague immediately remembered that in the village, where his mother lives, he saw in one yard just such a technique. Maybe still on the move, Benjamin contacted his mother, and soon she was running to the neighbor. Yes, he had a Caterpillar tractor. When the collective farm collapsed, he was able to take it for himself. Now he used it sometimes in his work. James was farming too, like Peter at Moose Creek. But he had less material resources. But he had a Caterpillar tractor. James, without further ado, I got it. We need to get the woman in labor to the ambulance. He found out where to pick her up and got on the road. He helped Jenna into the tractor. On the way, the man prayed to God that his passenger wouldn't give birth. No, he's seen it all, and he can do a lot of things, but it's definitely not his place to deliver a baby. At that time, an ambulance was waiting on the highway. The medics even wanted to walk. What's the point where there's knee-deep mud? How can they carry the woman in labor? They had to wait. Soon Rob joined them as well. He stopped his car and got into the Jeep with his colleagues. Oh, Rob, what are you doing here? Kevin, the EMT, was surprised. For the same reason as you, I'm meeting a woman in labor. They said they were on their way. They just called. That's good. Who are her good acquaintances? Soon they saw tractor drivers coming along the road, old, running, but confidently advancing on the off-road. It's time for us to get such equipment. Igor grinned. On such roads for sure. Rob supported him. James drove up to the highway. Rob helped Jenna out of the tractor and carried her to the ambulance. Rob, why are you here? Jenna repeated. You have to be at work in case there's an accident or a fire. God forbid. What does an accident or a fire have to do with it? Kevin asked ironically. Rob, when did you join the Ministry of Emergency Situations? I thought you were still operating on people. Like operating. Jenna gasped. Soon a man in pain stared at Rob. Rob, actually a young but hopeful surgeon, again answered the ER doctor. Surgeon Jenna howled in pain. But why? Why did you tell me you were in hospital administration? Then all later Rob told her softly and took her hand. Don't worry, I'll explain everything to you. Right now you mustn't think about anything else but the baby. He looked reproachfully at his colleague, but the latter just shrugged his hands and shrugged his shoulders, saying, I'm sorry, I said something wrong. Jenna was taken to the hospital quickly, without further adventures. Rob stayed at the hospital. He couldn't be home when Jenna was in labor. His thoughts were all about her. He sat in his ward, filling out routine reports, while he imagined how she was in agony right now. And every cell in his body seemed to feel her pain. Rob had never before imagined that such a thing could happen. No, he didn't care about the paperwork. He tossed the pen aside, stood up, and walked to the maternity ward. She'd just given birth. Your acquaintances joyfully informed him by the midwife at the entrance the boy is 3,755 kilograms. 9 points. Rob, hearing this, sat up on the couch. A wave of warmth washed over him. The boy is a healthy kid. His Jenna's a mom now. Immediately a note of doubt began to storm through his mind. Who is he? Just a good acquaintance. This kid of that guy who died on his desk, and he'll always remember that. Will look at the kid and remember how he couldn't help Andrew. Why did he think he'd be watching though? After all, now Jenna wouldn't have to tell everything, and she was unlikely to want to continue communicating with him. Maybe not telling everything. Yes, the surgeon was preparing Andrew for surgery, but he didn't have time to do anything. And that was the truth. How's Mom feeling? Rob lifted his head and looked at the midwife, who was standing next to him. She's fine. They've taken her to her room now, and she's probably sleeping on the poor thing. They say they took her on a Caterpillar tractor. The midwife shook her head. That's quite an adventure. Maybe it's a good thing. Or maybe she gave birth faster. And she went to the ward, musing to herself about the imperfections in our lives. Rob returned to his thoughts. How would things go from here? The next day, taking advantage of his official position, Rob made his way to Jenna's room. There were 2 other women lying with her. One of them, squinted and said hello to Rob first. It turned out that he had removed her toenail earlier in the year. Doctor, your hands are golden. The guy was barely sick at the time, and it healed quickly. Taking the opportunity, she said, and then, nodding to her neighbor, both slowly walked out of the room. The young mothers realized that the doctor and Jenna needed to talk. So they looked at each other expressively. Girls, I won't be long, thankfully, Rob warned them. Jenna was lying on the bed and her curly hair was rummaging across the pillow through a nightgown 2 sizes larger peeking over a skinny shoulder. Jenna realized this and bashfully covered herself with the sheet. So you really are a surgeon? She said thoughtfully, looking at Rob. Why did you lie to me? I couldn't tell the whole truth, Rob admitted. When I found out it was your husband who had died, I had a hard time in my operating room. No, it wasn't my fault he died, but I felt so sorry for you, and I wanted to do something to help you. Just sorry. At first, yeah. And then, Jenna, I realized I couldn't do it without you. I'm just your friend, and I'll stay that way if you want me to. But I need you to know that I need you, and I'll take your son. If you weren't responsible for Andrew's death, why didn't you say anything, letting him confess? Asked Jenna. Her eyes looked into his soul. At first I thought it was unnecessary to tell you, and then I thought you might blame me anyway. You loved your husband very much. I did. She agreed and closed her eyes. Rob was silent, and so was Jenna. Rob, I'm sorry, I'm tired, she finally said. Rest, he whispered. And for the first time in his life, he kissed more than just her hand, and she didn't pull her back. The next evening, Rob came again, and they had a long talk in the residence room where they were allowed to go in. Yes, Jenna was resentful of Rob for his lies, but in the little time they had known each other, she had managed to grow accustomed to him and love him, and by all his deeds and actions. Rob had proved that he was a wonderful man and would probably be a wonderful father for Sebastian. That's what she decided to name her son. Jenna did not go to Moose Creek again from the birth center. Rob took her and the baby to his home. To say that Rob's parents were very surprised, that's an understatement. He hadn't met anyone in the township, and then he brought his wife with a child. At first, my mother was distrustful of her daughter-in-law. Maybe she talked a guy's head off and wanted to shove someone else's child on their neck. But over time, Adriana's heart thawed. She realized that Jenna loves Rob, and she's a good hostess, and the father was happy to be a grandfather. Martin gladly walked with his grandson, even helped to bathe him. And the first word Sebastian said was grandfather. Jenna, of course, was very surprised, but not at all upset. So accepted her baby into this family, and they are native to them with a slide. 3 years passed. Sebastian was already in kindergarten. Rob also worked as a surgeon in the hospital, and Jenna, having entered the College of Culture in absentia, worked in the village club. Their family was simply a role model. Rob and Jenna were a beautiful couple, young, handsome lovers. Many in the district center even envied their relationship, and nothing heralded the storm. Then Mike arrived in the village. He still worked in the ministry and was even a small boss. After that story, Mike never came to visit his parents. More often they came to him. But here he decided to come himself. He heard from his father, and Rob got married. Alex, of course, recognized Rob's wife, the very girl he had told the twists of fate a few years ago with a sad look, and expressed his sympathy in the death of her first husband. And now she was Rob's wife. At first he'd been worried, thinking Rob was up to something, but then he'd realized he wasn't thinking anything like that. So he relaxed. Rob worked well with the head doctor, tried to keep his interactions to a minimum. He kept his mouth shut about this story too. Good for him. That's the smart one. Alex was happy and continued his work. It should be said that there were many ambiguous situations in his work, including the payment of labor to employees. But he got away with everything because he had good connections in the Ministry of Health. And now my son worked there too. And so in the evening after the son's arrival, they sat for a while at a delicious dinner. And then Alex and Nikolay went out on the terrace of their beautiful mansion to get some air. And somehow, while they were talking, they got to talking about Rob. And you know who his wife, Alex, rounded his eyes and shook his head. You won't believe it, the wife of the guy who died during the operation. But the same one. You what? Mike marveled. Why would it be love all of a sudden? I was expecting a trick at first, but now I realize it's love. Rob is such a fool raising someone else's child and is happy. He's a fool, Mike said. To hell with it, they switched to other topics. And the subject of Rob and his wife didn't seem to matter, but not to Mike. He spent a lot of time thinking about his father's words before he went to bed. So Rob is happy. Well. In the morning, he decided to see what the beauty was all about. Rob's wife had found Rob on the internet. Now they weren't friends, so they weren't interested in each other's lives. But this was different. Mike found joint photos of Rob with Jenna, saw their son. Happy, you say, Mike hissed softly, and he hatched a plan. He walked toward the club, intending to talk to Jenna and tell her something about her husband. Mike was sure that the young woman was living in ignorance that it was Rob who had operated on her husband. Jenna was surprised when the security guard informed her that an unknown man was waiting for her at the entrance. She went down. Presentable, solid, and clearly some kind of boss. She didn't know exactly who he was. Hello, he stepped forward, and I'm Mike, a classmate of Rob's. We used to work together. We need to talk. And I've been listening to you for a while, agreed Jenna tensely. She sensed a negative vibe coming from this man, a black haze hanging over him. Why don't we go to the park? Mike suggested. Jenna nodded again, and there on the bench Mike admitted that he'd been silent for a long time. But now he couldn't stay silent. He just doesn't have the right. He has to open Jenna's eyes to her husband. Your husband is a criminal, Mike blurted out. Jenna shuddered and recoiled from her interlocutor. You're saying terrible things. I'm sorry, but I don't want to listen to you. She turned to leave, but Mike grabbed her arm. Do you know that it was Rob who operated on your first husband? I know, Jenna said calmly, just like I know that Andrew died before the operation. How so? Mike grinned. His hands were shaking that day. He was hungover. I saw it all myself because I was at the stadium, at the operation. I told him to be more careful. If he can't do it, it's better not to start. We could have called the Air Force. He decided that, like God, he can do anything in any condition. I don't believe you. More pale, whispered Jenna. Rob doesn't drink and never has. Until his after that story, as the grandmothers whispered, really stopped using. My dad felt sorry for him. We went to school together. Rob was struggling, but he got his degree. We came here together. My dad didn't make a fuss. The pathologist made a judgment call. That's all. And me. I couldn't work with him anymore. I went to the city, got a job there. I'm sorry to tell you all this, but you should know the kind of man you're living with. Jenna listened to Mike and couldn't move as if struck by thunder. Was Rob involved in her Andrew's death? Or is the man lying? Why would he do that? Jenna remembered Rob's acquaintance. Their first interaction. He hadn't told her he was a surgeon. Yeah, then he explained why. But if he'd lied the first time, why not the second? Jenna kept believing what Mike was saying. And then, without a word back to him, she turned and walked briskly to the club. Soon she jumped out of there with her purse and ran in the direction of the house. And Mike, who was sitting in the park, smiled contentedly. Now his former friend would be in big trouble. Rob will prove otherwise. May not prove who he is without him, Mike. And Jenna, hastily packing her things, without explaining anything to Rob's parents, rushed to the daycare center, and then together with her son they left for the abandoned Moose Creek. Jenna realized that it was not a solution to live in an old house with a small child with no means of livelihood she could not. But that's okay, she needs to calm down and work things out. But to stay with Rob under the same roof she didn't want even 1 minute. Yes, the house was abandoned, but Jenna had started the same day to wash, to spruce up, to put everything in order. Along the way, she watched Sebastian sadly playing with the car in the middle of the yard behind his weeds. Better that than socializing with Rob. Too bad, except there were 3 pickings that were living out their lives in Rob's parents' yard. But what could be done? She'll leave Moose Creek, just to get her mind right for a while. Where to? Probably the city. Rob and Mom called at work. Adriana, drenching herself in tears, and told her that her daughter-in-law had run off with her grandson, but she didn't say where. Rob tried to call Jenna. The phone was unavailable. When he finished seeing patients, he hurried home to talk things over. On the way, Rob saw Mike. He was happily, contentedly riding in the car with his father. Rob had his first suspicions. He decided to dial a number he hadn't dialed in years. Surprisingly, a former friend answered the phone. "Mike, is that something you said to Jenna without saying too much?" Rob asked. "Rob, is that you, buddy?" Mike exclaimed happily. "Am I glad to hear from you? Good for you for calling Colia and asking you. But I saw your wife, she's cute. By the way, she was very surprised to learn that you were responsible for the death of her first husband." "Sorry, I thought she knew." Mike announced cheerfully. "What did you say?" Rob's jowls were flaring as he heard it. "What did you make up?" "It's all true. You prove it." And Mike, laughing, dropped the conversation. Back home, he couldn't recover for a long time. He'd been made to look bad, which was definitely not his fault. Jenna, it turns out, believed it. How do you prove her wrong? Martin, seeing his son's suffering, offered to talk frankly. And Rob told him everything about the details of the operation. Martin listened. He was quiet. This family should have been exposed long ago. Finally, he said, "Son, there is a plan." And Martin said that the son of his colleague is engaged in videotaping and including hidden. You can persuade him to put a camera. And then call Mike and call him for a frank conversation. Yes, such footage will not go to court, but it will make a lot of noise. And Jenna, when she finds out, will realize that she was wrong to believe in all these plots. Where to set up, where to call Mike? Michael offered an option. The same guy who was shooting in the VIP room, their most famous cafe in the village. There are no people there, and you can relax and blab extra. So they did. And then Rob called Mike and suggested we meet for a drink. "Mike, I was right. We've been friends for so many years, and then this happened. Let's make up," Rob said, calling Mike again. "You're invited to our best cafe. My treat." Rob knew Mike the freeloader was bound to bite. And so it was. The former friend came to the cafe in high spirits, in anticipation of a pleasant time at the Passage. "And the girls will be here," he joked. "Sits down, soft chair. Anything the customer wants." Nodded to and Rob. They had one drink each. Then they reminisced some more about childhood, adolescence, school. At some point it was clear that Mike had had enough to drink. Rob decided to take action. "Mike, tell me, why do you hate me?" he asked quietly. Mike froze for a second. Then he smiled. "You still don't believe in true friendship, do you? Rob, I had a different opinion of you and you of me. I knew you were a coward, but that you were sneaky and cowardly and sneaky." Suddenly Mike shrieked. "You are. Why do I hate you? You ask. Because you always thought I was nothing. At school, you were supposedly protecting me by cheating on me. And you wouldn't have gotten into college anyway if my dad hadn't helped you. You're nothing. I liked Molly first in high school, you know? I wanted to hook up with her, and she chose you. I've said all sorts of things about you, her and her alcoholic parents. And you live in a barn. How is she glued? Was she? Well, I set her up with that kid. She dumped you. She did the right thing. You and the Poppers. Okay, it doesn't matter." Trying my best to sound calm, Rob said, "Why did you tell Ira an untruth?" "That I said it was your fault. You can't prove it now. And your idiot believed that she left you. She ran away. Where's your happiness now? Burst like a soap bubble. I hate you. Serves you right. Mike, you know I had nothing to do with Andrew's death. You were responsible for the patient's death, but I kept my mouth shut all these years. Yeah, and I sent him to the afterlife. Double dose of anesthesia. So I didn't think, had a little too much to drink over the holidays. So what? My dad covered for me anyway. And you're so noble. He was silent, so now he's getting paid for his silence. Your wife, I left you. Not only that, I've also informed the press that such a doctor works. That's gonna hurt the head doctor. We have serious patrons. And you fool won't be able to clean yourself up for the rest of your life. I've had enough of you. Fuck you. And Mike staggered off towards the exit, while Rob remained seated. He'd been overwhelmed all these years. He hadn't realized how much Mike hated him and why. After all, it would seem that Mike had everything and opportunity and wealth without the most important brains. I guess that's why I hated Rob. That was a great shot. Rob wondered what to do with it. He decided to consult with Benjamin. His colleague, of course, wondered for a long time what Rob had kept silent about for so long, and then admitted that it was hard to say when there was no defense behind you. I didn't like the head doctor right away, Benjamin added. And then he suggested that we take the footage to the investigative committee. Let them sort it out, consider it a delusion of a fallen man. Let it be so. And if the case goes through, Alex will fly from his chair at the speed of sound. And I'll probably be prosecuted, Rob suggested. I don't think so. You didn't do anything. You'll tell us how it was, and that's it, Benjamin reassured. The main thing is to find your wife and show her the tape. Do you have any idea where she might be? Only Moose Creek. Nowhere else. I'm taking tomorrow off. Of course, Rob had wanted to go to Moose Creek after Jenna disappeared, but would she listen to him? Now he had his chance. Jenna was pulling weeds in the yard when she heard a car pull up in front of the house. Yes, she had assumed Rob would show up here, but she kept hoping it wouldn't happen. It hurt her to see someone who had done that to Andrew. She was living with a monster, and it was scary. Stay away from me, she shouted, thrusting forward a rag, which happened to be nearby. Hit me if you want to, quietly said Rob only at the beginning. You listen, it's not my fault. Did you believe the man who was responsible for Andrew's death? I have a tape of him talking about everything. You're lying again. The only thing I've been telling you the truth about all this time is that I didn't tell you the real reason Andrew died. Because I was afraid of losing you. But it wasn't my fault. Rob stepped forward decisively in one motion, flipped the folder out of Jenna's hands, then shoved the phone into her hands. See for yourself. Jenna at first wanted to throw the phone in her husband's face, but then something stopped her, and she watched the tape in the cafe with unblinking eyes. What does that mean? She whispered as she looked through the whole thing. Mike had come in drunk for surgery that day. His father, the chief of surgery, refused to call for an airlift. And Mike didn't calculate the right dose of anesthesia. That's why your husband's heart stopped. Yes, I knew all that. But I repeat, I kept quiet at first because I realized I couldn't do anything alone. Then I met you, and I was afraid of hurting you even more with this truth. I was there, but there was nothing I could do. That was it. Saying this, Rob walked away and sat on the porch with his head down. Jenna stood confused. She should have run away without talking to her husband. It was stupid. There was no getting Andrew back. And Rob, he had become a loving husband and father to her. Rob, you should have told me yourself, she said. Finally, I would have understood, and would have been tormented by the realization that Mike and his father were quietly healthy and in positions of power. Bitterly, he pronounced, "Why did you have to? Was it true? So that what happened wouldn't happen?" Quietly said Jenna. She walked over to Rob, sat down next to him, and rested her head on his shoulder. Rob, I'm sorry. Take us home already. That's what I came for. He smiled and put his arm around his wife's shoulders. Where is Sebastian? Sleeping in the house. And then there was the slap of her bare feet on the floor. Daddy. Sebastian shrieked with joy and threw himself on his father's neck. And everything suddenly fell into place. They were all together again because they were a family. The investigative committee took an interest in the tape. Both Mike and his father were summoned to give explanations. Rob wasn't forgotten. The pathologists called them in, although they later decided it was just the ramblings of an inebriated man. The Department of Health were quick to disavow their former friends. and soon Mike was sacked on some other grounds. The head doctor was removed for abuse of power. Even a criminal case was opened for misuse of budget funds, and afterwards they gave him 3 years with confiscation of property. The pathologist took a well-deserved retirement and went south to be with his children. In short, Rob was the only one left in the village. He was not touched in any way and continued to work. Benjamin is the head doctor now, and things seem to be getting better at the hospital. And so does Rob's family. Jenna went back. After the trial, they were given a spacious 2-bedroom apartment. Now they're going to need it, because Sebastian is going to have a baby sister soon.
Adriana was characterized from a young age not only by her pretty face, but also by her tenacity, intelligence, and strength of character. When others dreamed of principles, she decided that she did not need a rich prince. She had no need for any mediator between her and money. The girl immediately decided to achieve everything herself, so that she would not be indebted to anyone and would not have to humiliate herself before anyone. Her classmates and school friends twirled a finger at the temple, watching the girl cramming. In order not to get an extra grade good, everything should always be only excellent. I see the goal, I see no obstacles. Such was Adriana's motto from her youth. It was no surprise that such desperate hard work and determination was rewarded. Everything went as written in the young girl's head, first entering a budget place in a prestigious university in another city, then a good job in a well-known firm, and a brilliant career. Love affairs were insofar as she did not prioritize them in her life, but only supplemented her life with them, bringing variety. Another beau was next to her, only as long as he gave her joy and did not cause unnecessary trouble. If even the slightest discomfort began, the girl immediately broke off such relationships. One would think that she used her feminine charms to generalize men who could bring her some benefits, promote her career, or give expensive gifts. Not at all. The girl preferred weak men whom she could calculate and suppress. She preferred to achieve everything only on her own, so that no one could take away from her deserved laurels and appropriate her next victory. That's why Adriana had a clear division between personal life and entertainment and serious business life, in which she knew no other gods but money and power. To mix these two concepts was unacceptable, unthinkable for her. For almost 30 years of her life, Adriana existed with such principles and was not going to change them for someone else. But, as it usually happens, some external circumstances, dictated by God's will, by fate, by chance, ruins all the previous life with all the principles and attitudes. Adriana's life was no exception. A man appeared in her life by chance, with whom she fell in love immediately and without looking back. For her, the previous choice would have been extremely unusual. Benjamin was characterized by strength of mind and intelligence. He was not to be broken and rebuilt under his heel, as the girl was accustomed to. And another mockery. They met at work. As did not glue and did not live, Adriana not to have office romances with her fate did not bypass her. Worse, Benjamin was Adriana's boss. She worked in his direct subordinate, was dependent on him and his will completely. Fate was cruelly laughing at the girl, at her principles that she had spent so long cultivating, walking, and cherishing. Benjamin was invited by the board of directors to become manager of one of the branches of the firm where Adriana labored. By that time, her success in the service, especially considering the young lady's age, was colossal. She was the first deputy manager. And if Adriana immediately, herself desperately unwilling, reached out to the boss, he, on the contrary, immediately disliked her. Benjamin reasonably, as it seemed to him, reasoned that a girl with such appearance achieves career heights solely because of the favor that causes the bosses in various immoral ways. It took several months for his opinion of the girl to begin to change in his mind, and he allowed himself to feel some sympathy. It was only her efficiency, dedication, and feedback from her colleagues that helped the boss overcome his prejudice. He began to look more closely at the young and beautiful employee. Adriana all this time silently suffered from unrequited love. What usually girls go through in early adolescence, she experienced at the age of Balzac women. The feelings covering her with her head kept Adriana's mind at ease. When finally, at a New Year's Eve corporate party, a man approached and made small talk, her heart nearly jumped out. The quiet, calm, thoughtful conversation between two people who were skeptical of each other ended up with the fact that they could not tear themselves away from each other. All night long they talked and talked, finding new topics to discuss and new issues to talk about. Adriana was falling in love more and more every minute, even though it seemed impossible. Benjamin was also amazed that he was still able to experience such a wide range of feelings and emotions for a woman. They were no longer drawn to each other unilaterally, and they could not and would not resist their feelings. Less than 6 months later, the lovers were married. Adriana experienced absolute, all-encompassing happiness, but unfortunately, it was not destined to last long. For almost 4 years, Adriana and Benjamin lived soul to soul. It is hard to believe, but during this time they did not even quarrel, never raised their voices. All around envied the love and understanding between the spouses. One significant nuance overshadowed their existence. Adriana could not get pregnant, although the couple dreamed that they would have an heir. When a medical examination revealed that Benjamin is not able to have their biological children, for the couple it was a blow. There were long discussions about all sorts of alternatives, all the discussions that had been started, and Adriana's entire life was stopped by Benjamin's death. A heart attack cut short the 42-year-old man's life suddenly and tragically. How Adriana survived it, she herself could not explain. The girl did not even remember the funeral, so everything after the news lost for her existence and any meaning. Since there were no close people in Adriana's life besides her colleagues and husband, it was her comrades who had to save her. Strangely enough, everything was solved by one question, which was asked by her friend from work, who came to visit as a patronage. "Adriana, do you think Benjamin would like to see you like this?" "He would. He'd want you to suffer and kill yourself like that." The girl didn't really mean it when she said it, but she wasn't ready for it to work. It was an emotional outburst, full of despair born of helplessness. But it was what gave the first impetus to the changes in the widow's mind. Everything happened like in a fairy tale. The cocoon that the woman had been carrying for months did not fall away at the same second. But these words of a stranger, in fact, changed Adriana's thinking. At some point, she decided that passively killing herself was tantamount to betraying Benjamin and their love, because he would do anything, sacrifice himself, but would want Adriana to live and be happy. She loved him so much that she could not disobey him even now, after his death. Now Adriana was determined to move on with her life, however difficult it was for her to do so. Entirely and completely, the woman devoted herself to work, put all of herself into it. She and during her marriage did not stop in her goals. Adriana, and in general, there was a need for self-realization. After the death of her husband, her zeal increased manifold. Although in money, Adriana did not need money at all. She had become a very well-to-do lady. Her late husband earned well, but also inherited from his parents had a solid capital. Now the entire state went into sole possession of Adriana.
Benjamin had no other heirs. The woman by feel was learning to live again, without her favorite man. It was extremely difficult for her. She could not even think of a new relationship. It seemed as if she would never violate or desecrate Benjamin's memory. Some trifling private affair.
At the time, she was sure that other than to defile another, the verbs could not have been chosen. Men seemed petty and unworthy to Adriana now. She couldn't stop comparing them to Benjamin, and he was a giant next to the dwarfs that now met her life's path, as he had been to her before. The harsh reality shattered the woman's hopes of a career fixation and a lonely old age. By then, she had resigned herself to the fact that in retirement she would have to look for a nursing home for singles. But 2 years after the death of her first husband, Adriana interrupted her monastic existence to meet a new man. Unlike Benjamin, it was not love at first sight. The man she met was called Ethan. They met at a regular work meeting. He was just a hired manager at a contracting company. Adriana didn't feel anything at first, and her heart did not flutter as it did when she first met Benjamin. However, the signs of attention, beautiful courtship did their job. The heart of the widow began to defend. It cannot be said that the woman gave in to her feelings. Rather, from her side, there was a cold and sober calculation. Being almost a year in therapy with a psychoanalyst, she came repeatedly to the conclusion that it is necessary to have a man around, at least for fun. There were no hopes and aspirations for something serious, much less for a new marriage. Just normal, calm, easy relationships. But to look for them independently was not forces and desire. It was an excuse for herself that someday a man will appear by himself. It is not necessary to do anything for this purposefully and deliberately. Adriana she wanted and got at the same time. Therefore she was in the most passive search, thus hiding her inner fears and panic. When Ethan appeared suddenly in her life, insistent and determined, she simply did not find arguments to refuse him at once. It hadn't seemed serious at the time, not for long. But Ethan wanted something completely different. He wanted a serious relationship, was ready to get married, and according to assurances very much wanted children, was ready for family life and responsibility. That was what broke the woman then in her desperate clutch for her own grief and loneliness. She and Benjamin had wanted children so badly, but fate had decreed otherwise. After his death, she naturally put an end to childbearing as well. Everything died in her with his death, and only after a while it was ready to be reborn again. She could deceive herself and her head, but she could not deceive her feelings and the nature inside her. Her nature was begging for a baby. You can't fool the hormones. Adriana may not have wanted Ethan, but he wanted kids too. He proposed the idea himself. He seemed calm, rational, and very responsible. In fact, she thought he'd make a good father. It was these thoughts that led Adriana to the registry office with Ethan. She gave in. As soon as they became legally married, they immediately began to plan the expansion of the newly created cell of society. The newly married wife, with all the fervor and enthusiasm, approached the issue. The desire to become a mom overwhelmed everything. For her at that point in her life, such frenzied zeal simply could not lead to negative results. Already 11 months after the marriage, Adriana discharged from the maternity hospital with a newborn son. Named him, of course, Benjamin. How could it be otherwise? Life had turned upside down, turned 180 degrees, and was all about the miraculous. A boy's cheeks swelled. At that moment, the woman was happy. It seemed to her sincerely that the son was a blessing from the first spouse. She had no heart for the boarding house and had dissolved into domesticity and motherhood. Her character seemed to allow nothing to be done half-heartedly. She had now abandoned her career and turned her full attention to her family. She was absolutely unconstrained in means, and this seemed a sensible and proper approach. About the same time, Ethan came to his wife with a serious conversation. Adriana, I am now the main earner in the family and my income is not commensurate with our spending, he began. Dialogue. Don't worry, we are not needy at all, laughed the woman, not yet realizing where her husband was leading. I realize that, yes. But it's like I'm an opportunist who can't provide for my family. Ethan said sadly, I'm taking care of the baby by myself and I'm not interfering with your career. If it's important to you, it's important to realize yourself. I'm all for it. You won't earn as much as we need now. When I thought about it for a long time, I thought I wanted to have my own business, not work for an uncle. Ethan came in from a distance, and Adriana. I didn't realize where he was going with this yet. I'll support your decision, no problem. But it's going to take a lot of capital to get started. Adriana. Her husband was looking at her intently. You want to ask me for money to start your own business? In general, yes. I wouldn't want to take out a loan. You know that all my major assets are invested for my son's future. I want to take care of and contribute to his future too. Don't you understand? Ethan showed insult with all his appearance, knowing how his wife felt about her son and that his future was sacred to her. That's what he was playing at. I have to admit, he thought it through, hit all the right pain points, plus parental feelings. The play was calculated to the smallest nuance. Knowing Adriana like the back of his hand, it was easy for him to lead her to the decision he wanted her to make. Ethan was simply happy when Adriana handed him the first financial tranche he needed for the first time. The man glowed, of course, convincing his wife once again that it was all just to support the family with dignity. And Adriana herself didn't mind. Let her want to, go into another line of work, look for herself. She knew she had cash in her prenuptial accounts for almost any life eventuality. Thanks to Benjamin and his family. And while Ethan was transforming into a prosperous businessman, his spouse was increasingly transforming into an outdated housewife. Her character did not allow her to ask for help and complain, despite having financial opportunities. She morally could not afford to relax and hire a helper for the house or for the child. Her son grew up restless, mobile, and demanded a lot of attention. Due to the busyness of her spouse, she was the only one who could give it. Plus, no one canceled the housework. Everything was on her, because Ethan worked almost around the clock, then problems with government agencies, then checks. In general, he was hardly ever home. Adriana was not bothered by this. She gave all her time, love, and care to her son. She had little interest in her husband. Marriage was the most important thing for her because she had a child. This mode of existence of the spouses lasted for quite a long time. Adriana, of course, did not know what was in her husband's head and soul. But she herself formally performed everything that was required from her side. At some point, her husband's absences began to bother her too much. She couldn't find a better solution and asked a direct question. Watching him, checking his cell phones and personal belongings was humiliating for both herself and him. "Ethan, you're not home all the time. I'm going to ask you straight out, trusting in your integrity. Do you have another woman?" "What other woman?" "I'm constantly working to get this business back on its feet, to bring tangible income to the backwoods. I work so hard for our family." His surprise and his offended mother were so convincing that Adriana unreservedly believed her husband's words. There was not a shadow of doubt about his sincerity. Moreover, she had a high opinion of his moral character and believed that he could not insult her with such a direct and blatant lie. Life went on again, not a bit changed. Adriana alone struggled desperately with the household chores and raising her son, while Ethan was always at work. And so it continued until the day that changed Adriana's life. She received a text message on her phone. She only heard the notification sound, but didn't rush to read it at first. Probably some advertisement again, but then something twitched inside, some inner intuition turned on, and Adriana took the phone in her hands. On the screen was a message from an unknown number with the horrifying text, "Want to know the truth about your husband?" Hurriedly, he went to his office. The first reaction was complete stupor. After a few moments, it already seemed that this is just someone's evil and stupid joke. But after a minute, Adriana decided that it was necessary to be sure. The woman hated uncertainty more than anything. She wasn't prepared to live and wonder if this was a real warning by well-wishers or a joke. 3 minutes later, Adriana, fully dressed, rang the doorbell for her neighbor. It just so happened to be the only person she could trust with her son. The girl was also the girl's mother, almost Benjamin's age, and the neighbors occasionally insured each other and helped each other out. She'd talk to her son as she walked, so he wouldn't suspect anything amiss. "Kitty, Mommy has to leave right away. If you sit there, you're gonna lose." Well, the little guy was only excited at the prospect. Because of his age, he did not notice the changes in the woman's behavior, did not see that his mother is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Neighbor Christina, opening the door, saw from the bell Adriana with burning eyes and at first even frightened. "My God, is that you?" "Hi, something happened?" "Hi, I don't know yet. I need to run away urgently and I'd better leave Benjamin behind. Can you help me out?" "Sure. What are you talking about?" "Benjamin, are you going to play with Clara?" she asked the little one, who had already entered the apartment with pleasure. "But I didn't have time to feed him." "Stop it. I was just about to call Clara myself for lunch." "Thanks, I'll call." "Take your time. If I have to, I can handle it. You know that." It was the first time Christina had seen Adriana in such a state, and she obviously understood that the situation was not ordinary. She minded her own business, but she was ready to help in any way she could. "Benjamin, bye-bye. I'll be right there." The boy's mom responded. He only smiled back, waved awkwardly, and walked further into the apartment. Adriana literally ran to the car, afraid of being late. Thoughts were shifting unevenly in her head. She had absolutely no idea what to think or what was going on, but she really wanted to know the truth. She rushed to the office quickly. A good thing it was not far from the house at all. As she ran out of the building, Adriana thought of what would happen next and what she would say. She remembered that she had been unusually lucky. Only last night Ethan had complained that his secretary was ill, so she could hear what was going on in her husband's office from the adjoining room. No one to explain herself to, and no one to interrupt. That was just the way it was. Adriana peered into the reception area. No one. The secretary's desk was empty. The woman breathed first so no one would hear her loud, confused breathing, and then tiptoed in, trying to move silently, and closed the door behind her. Listening to the sounds of the woman, the numbness of his heart went to his heels. Her mouth became sharply dry. From the doorway of Ethan's study came a woman's cheerful laughter and her husband's voice. Adriana felt desperately humiliated, but she couldn't stop. She leaned over to the keyhole. The husband was sitting at his desk so that only his waist was visible. He was naked. On his lap sat a young and beautiful girl. She was the one who was chiming with laughter. Her first phrase, which the woman could make out, warmed the unfortunate woman like a shoe on the head. It's time to send her to the garbage. She's an old woman, 40 years old, and I'm only 25. Am I not a pretty bear? I want to marry you too. It's not that simple, baby, Ethan replied. Adriana had nothing further to listen to. Her husband fell to the lips of his young mistress. Without remembering herself, the woman decided to leave. Little bear. What a ringing vulgarity. That little girl is talking about sending me to the garbage dump. She's going to get married. She's going to marry my husband. Adriana was just furious. Everything inside was like a catalepsy. Despite the range of feelings and emotions that the woman was going through, she was not going to get hot and act on instinct like a mad woman. It was necessary to think and weigh everything and talk carefully. If it came so far that this young nymph wants to get married, the first thing to do is to prepare. And in case of divorce, it is urgent to check her current financial situation. Has Adriana already given her spouse some money for the business? There's nothing to be done. Obviously, this money needed to be said goodbye to. So the first action of the insulted and humiliated wife was the completely non-obvious decision to go to the bank and look at her assets in detail. To do an audit. And the inspection all inside kept rolling with rage. But she kept her emotions at bay. Such a display would be unnecessary now. One must not be allowed to do anything foolish under the influence of swelling emotions. The woman drove. In the car, she was conducting auto training to calm down and not to do something irreparable. Apparently, her husband is not what she naively thought he was. He pressed on the painful, on the desire to become a mother, sneakily taking advantage of the situation. And also asked for a fairly decent amount of money from her personal funds. He must have thought about and calculated various options, while Adriana, like a burdock, hung her ears and believed everything. Now that's coming to an end. But for decisive action, she must first gather all the information. Finally, she parked outside the main office of the bank where all her assets were kept and where she was a premium customer, had a personal manager. Looking at herself in the mirror, the woman was good, but seen like this, there was no way to go. Adriana didn't even have time to sign her name when she ran out of the house, needing to tidy herself up, albeit hastily, put on a little makeup. That did the trick. Monotonous. The familiar routine calmed the lingering nerves a bit. Adriana entered the main entrance, already more calm. She was obligingly led to the meeting room and brought coffee. There she waited for her personal manager, William. The man didn't appear until 15 minutes later, almost ran into the room and immediately started apologizing. Good afternoon, I apologize, Adriana, but you did not warn me of your visit and I could tell he was terribly embarrassed. Hello. Of course, no problem. An urgent matter came up, and I decided not to put it off. The woman even found the strength to smile. I'd be happy to help you. I'd like to see the status of all my accounts, including my investment accounts. No problem. But we need to gather all the information. I'm going to need a little time. Can you wait about 10 minutes? That's okay. I'll just have my coffee. Thank you. Okay, then I'll be right over and ask for more coffee to be brought to you. Adriana sat, waiting for the manager and figuring out her options. Lately, she had been supporting the family completely. And if she and the baby didn't require a lot of expenses, Ethan paid with his wife's card quite generously. And very much it gnaws at her that there is no option to return the spent money that went to Ethan's business. It will be 100% and twisted as a gift. There's very little chance of that even in court. Okay, let's see what's left. Not much left to wait for. The woman reassured herself. At last, William appeared in the doorway, carrying her many papers. Please, I'll be ready to answer your questions, the bank clerk obligingly emphasized. Adriana began to study the bills and was shocked. Almost immediately, she saw a glaring discrepancy. Wait, here's where it came from. Right here and here, the debits I definitely didn't take out. These are bills for my son's future. So your husband Ethan made transfers to his personal corporate accounts. I beg your pardon? The woman was dripping cold sweat. She couldn't have dreamed up this kind of transfer. He provided a general power of attorney on your behalf. We've attached it. Look, open it at the end. Adriana flipped through the stack of papers in a panic until she saw the characteristic stamped seal and began to read the text. Indeed, it appeared that she had granted her husband the right to manage all her assets, but she had not signed any power of attorney. What's wrong? William asked fearfully, seeing the client's reaction. Everything is wrong. Why didn't you inform me? He's your lawful husband. I'll be sick. The clerk said you were on maternity leave and it was inconvenient. The man was in a panic. Adriana realized the pointlessness of further conversation. Something had to be done and solved. But the bank had nothing to do with it. She started with the essentials in a decisive and commanding tone. So I get it. I need 3 things from you, William. First, I need copies of all these documents. Adriana pointed her finger at the folder. Number 2, if my husband, God forgive me, Ethan, shows up here, don't tell him that I'm aware of any operations that I've been in, and there was something wrong with my reaction. 3, in general, if he comes in and wants to make transactions on my property, you call me immediately. Is that clear? Yes, of course. But what happened? Isn't that your signature right here on the power of attorney? That's just it. William blushed at first, then sharply divided from the overflow of emotion. What am I? What can we do? The man was simply shocked. He immediately imagined the scale of the disaster. For now, you must only do what I say. I haven't thought through the next steps yet. I need to notify the authorities. Maybe call the police. Okay, stop. Any initiative will be penalized. I've had a lot of money taken from me under a fake power of attorney. If you don't want this to be a problem for you and your management, please do as I say. William nodded. Apparently the energy for emotional reactions just wasn't there. He was frightened and shocked at the same time, saying goodbye and once again making sure that nothing would be done without her and that her instructions would be carried out. Adriana walked away. She herself was shocked, terrified, panicked, all at the same time. What to do now is absolutely unclear. Probably need to find a competent lawyer to consult. The woman so bravely commanded the manager, although she herself did not really understand what to do. She was sitting in the car with her hands on the steering wheel, staring off into the distance. Too many vivid shocks. In a few hours, the limit of emotions had been exhausted. In return for them came confusion and absolute incomprehension, what to do next and how to behave with Ethan. The woman broke away from her thoughts only when she heard an intrusive sound. Came out of her head. She saw some woman knocking on the window from the passenger side. Adriana instinctively checked that the doors were locked and only then pressed the button for the glass to roll down. What do you want? Adriana. Hello, we need to talk. You don't know me. That message you got today, I sent it. I'm waiting for you at that cafe. The woman pointed her finger at an establishment at the other end of the square. You will be interested in my information and an offer I guarantee. The stranger hurriedly left, and Adriana tried to figure out if she wanted any more information. But there was nothing to do. She herself was at a dead end, and every new little morsel of new information could help her a lot. So the woman got out of the car and followed the stranger. Adriana entered the establishment and looked around to see where to go. The stranger was already sitting at one of the tables and waved at her. Adriana headed towards her. I'm glad you decided to talk. My name is Betty. What's my name? How do you know? About my husband, too. More than I do, Adriana answered. Have a seat across from me. So I'd like to know something about you. I'm Ethan's ex-lover, she replied calmly. Ethan's spouse was immediately skewered by another blow. I didn't know at the time we met that he was married, so you have nothing to hate me for. I'm just as much a victim of circumstance. And you want to marry him too, like that girl in his office today. All from the villa. The wife. God save me. Forgive me, but your position is very unenviable. The mistress wasn't going to be too subtle either. Adriana would have been happy to say more witty things, but she couldn't find anything to say. It was the absolute truth, bitter as it was, but yes. So what then do you want to help you and avenge yourself? I won't be lurking, Betty replied. To get back at him for not telling you he was married. For not living up to your expectations? For betraying you? I could ask you to elaborate. Well, there's not much to tell. I work in the tax office, I was conducting an audit, and he needed, shall we say, some preferential treatment. Adriana exhaled sharply from what she had heard, and from what she had heard, and from another act of her husband. And it seemed that she knew him well. And after that she left him at once. Even with sympathy, asked the lawful wife to the mistress. That's right. Judging by the messages and the fact that you tracked me down, he did it for nothing. Yeah, I can't forgive that. I can understand that. You also said you wanted to help me. What did you talk about? Money, of course. I know about Ethan giving you a fake power of attorney to clean out your personal accounts, put it into business and legalize it in such detail. Did you do a good job? There's just one thing I can't figure out. Maybe you can? Why would he do all this? I'd find out sooner or later that money was missing from my accounts. Was I supposed to swallow it? It's obvious to a fool that I'd go to the police. Apparently it was planned that you should not live to see this moment, Betty said calmly. That Adriana shrieked so much that all the visitors and staff turned on them. And that's the only way it makes sense. The money is withdrawn to give it the status of a gift, which of course becomes Ethan's property immediately. If you know him, he'll go straight to jail. It's obvious to a fool. As you rightly point out, this is pure fraud. So you shouldn't have known. Why so complicated? The shocked wife squeezed out of herself. I found out that you have no prenuptial agreement with him, but you have a will. So you're well informed. Now think about its contents and think. Betty nudged and guided the former rival's thought. All my property goes to my son, naturally. But Ethan would be a guardian, under the watchful eye of the guardianship authorities. 1. 2. Why would he need an intermediary? And the scary part is I get it. But who says he needs a son? I'll be fair. I don't know exactly. It's my own personal speculation and conjecture. It's some kind of nightmare. Adriana was silent, and Betty didn't want to say anything else until the previous information was thoroughly understood. So now he's busy making sure that all of my property is his through a gift, so that if I die, I'll have nothing. That's about it. Yeah, I found a bunch of circumstantial evidence to support my theory. They're right here. Betty pulled a bulky folder out of her bag. This is going to sound terribly ungrateful. But why are you doing all this? First of all, revenge. I don't want to and I won't hide it. It's no shame not to forget the wrongs done. Secondly, I feel sorry for you. I'm especially sorry about your boy. Adriana's tears rolled down her eyes. She just didn't understand how it was possible. Her own husband was actually preparing to kill her for money. Isn't that just the plot of a bad movie? It's really what happens in real life. I find it hard to believe everything you said. Yeah, I saw that girl today, heard the conversation, part of the drive to the bank. But look, there's a limit to everything. Also this morning, if I had come to you and told you about the endless cheating, about him stealing money, would you have believed it? I asked Betty a very reasonable question. That's different, you mean? I'm not forcing you to do anything, Adriana. You have to make your own decision. How much time do I have? How long are you willing to wait? Me. As long as you want. When Ethan is going to act, only he knows. One thing I do know is you don't have any more money. You know that. And what exactly do you suggest? File a police report, of course. I've got plenty of people I know. I, for my part, only accelerated some of the processes. Don't forget that it's very important to block all his accounts. Unless the court orders a remand for some reason. Ethan must not be able to withdraw his money and go into the mist. All accounts must be sealed for provisional measures. It's a necessity if you want your money back. Personally, I have more information in this folder on several other felonies. It's all in here. I want to go over it in detail. I can take the file with me. Of course, I brought it for you. But I would strongly advise you not to talk to Ethan. It's all over your face. I wasn't planning to.
We can make an appointment to meet here tomorrow, just in the morning. In the morning would be best. Do I need to go through all the documents and think about what I said? Adriana asked. Okay. Adriana walked out of the cafe in a daze.
There was no plan in her head. Everything had happened so abruptly that she was confused. A blow like that would knock anyone down and turn all thoughts upside down. First things first, Adriana thought that it was necessary to deal with problems as they came. She dialed her neighbor's number. Hello, Christina. It's me again. Excuse me, please. I can leave you Benjamin until tomorrow night. It's very serious and important. I'll cry, stop hurting me. What are you talking about? Sure, let him stay, but he can play with Kira. The girl responded immediately. Thank you. I'm eternally grateful. I owe you one. Put him on the phone for a second. 1 minute. Hello, Adriana, I heard Benjamin's voice. Son, it's Mom. Do you mind having a sleepover? Yay. The boy shouted childishly. All right, I'll see you soon. I don't miss you. Okay, I love you, baby. Bye. Bye, kisses. The son responded. Christina answered the phone again. Did you talk to her? Yes, thank you. Thanks again for helping out so much. Oh, come on. Today it's me, tomorrow it's you. Once my son's staycation was settled, I had to text. The husband needed something to lie about to make it sound believable. Just then, Adriana racked her brain. She couldn't come up with an idea. She desperately didn't want to lie about someone's health to cause unnecessary trouble. There was enough to go around, and nothing else came to mind. What could also make Adriana break away from her seat, leave her son and fly away to an unknown destination at breakneck speed? Thinking some more, Adriana dialed the number of her fellow coworker Kathy. She had been her deputy before her maternity leave and now took her place. She was the closest woman in her circle. Kathy, hi. Did you disturb me? Hi. No, of course not. It's good to hear from you. I have a favor to ask of you. To be honest, I need to get out of the house right away to surprise Ethan with a sleepover. Would you mind telling him I'm at your place? I'll tell him you needed my help with something urgent, that we'll be up all night fiddling with paperwork before the inspection. The woman on the other end of the line laughed. All right, if you have to do it, I'll do it. Thank you. Adriana couldn't think of a better option at that moment anyway. Interfering with her elderly and sick parents was something she absolutely did not want to do. It was finally possible to send Ethan a text with the hastily made-up excuse. She typed the following text: Ethan, Kathy urgently needed help with some paperwork. Will probably take until morning. Don't worry, Benjamin arranged it. She really hoped her spouse would reply with a message too, and she wouldn't have to lie in such a real-time state with no time to think about it. A few minutes later came a reply message from her husband, okay informing. The woman finally exhaled. She now had time to think about it and the advice of a good and reliable man. Michael had just arrived home after a long and hard day when someone rang the doorbell of his apartment. He was extremely surprised to see the wife of his best friend, who had died a long time ago, on his doorstep. Michael, hi. I'm sorry to barge in on you like this, but it's really urgent. Adriana spoke in rapid succession. Hello. Well, if that's the case, please come into the kitchen. I just got here and I'm trying to make myself something for dinner. I'll take care of it, with your permission. The woman said, undressing, and I'll tell you what I came with. Michael was amazed. He had not seen Adriana for a long time, and she had never behaved like this before. He was afraid that something really terrible had happened. Adriana was Benjamin's wife, a widow to be exact. He wasn't just Michael's best friend, he was practically a brother. They were very close, so his widowed wife was no doubt worthy of any help from Michael. Did something happen? Yeah, I'll get to the bottom of it. Here's the file. I'll tell you first, then you can see what you've got here, what to cook with. He showed her all the foodstuffs he had, and silently, expectantly looked at the glowing woman and waited for her to start her story. Adriana concentrated on making dinner and began her story, describing every little detail without leaving out any details. She began with the anonymous message she had received that afternoon about what she had seen in her husband's office, the incident at the bank, and the horror of seeing all the money gone. I told her how I'd met Betty and what she'd told her and what the plan was. We agreed to meet tomorrow morning. I'm taking a break to think it over and consult with you." In a folder on the table were the papers Betty had given me and copies of the ones the bank had given me. Michael sat there without moving. He couldn't believe what the woman had told him. It seemed like nonsense and absurdity. Adriana finally looked at him, distracted from cooking, and, seeing his reaction, added, "I wouldn't have believed it myself. So I understand your reaction, but you can study the papers," still in silence. The man obediently opened the folder and plunged into their study. When the hostess had everything ready, she put the plate in front of Michael and froze. Such an expression on the face of a calm and melancholy man she had never seen before. What to do? Everyone here was shocked that it was true. Perhaps he just wasn't an exception. Adriana sat next to him and watched as Michael continued to read his facial expression. It was changing to a more surprised one, though it seemed impossible. Everyone was put off. "Eat up. Come on, the food's getting cold." "I thought you were crazy." That man couldn't even find the right words. "Yeah, that proves it exactly." It turns out Betty was telling the truth. "I came here to make sure I wasn't crazy. It's just that it's been hours, and I can't believe my husband did this. And I guess that's not the end of the story. Because in order to complete his plan, to accomplish his goal, he needs me to die. From what I'm seeing, he does. Your Betty is right. He can't do anything without it. If you find out that money has gone out of your accounts, see a power of attorney that you didn't sign, and go to the police with it, they'll just take everything away from him and put him in a cage like a giraffe. That's hardly part of his plan." Adriana couldn't take it anymore and finally gave vent to her feelings and emotions and burst into tears. Michael would have liked to calm her down. But how? What could he say? He silently looked at the woman suffering and did not know how to help her. "I wondered," she began. "And that's why he married me. It was all a plan and manipulation from the beginning. Only Ethan knows that." "Adriana, I can't believe I'm such a fool. What are you going to do about all this now?" He decided it was time to bring the poor woman back to reality. "If you don't mind, I'd like to check the authenticity of some papers before the meeting to absolutely and surely rule out forgery." "You think Betty could do that?" "If I'd known who was capable of what, I wouldn't be in this lousy situation. Now I'm going to blow on the water indefinitely and reasonably. And then, if convinced, agree to all her terms, of course. Then Betty's help will be invaluable and much needed. I'm sorry I put all this on you. I hope you won't say no to me. You're the only person I can trust right now. It's out of the question. I'll help in any way I can. Just make sure we give you a good one first." "Thank you," the man smiled, trying his best to cheer up the unhappy woman. Confused. They were brought in until almost 4. Checked every last comma. There was no evidence of forgery. All the documents provided were genuine. There was no doubt at all. Much to Adriana's dismay, everything seems to be accurate in my opinion. "What do you think? You've been dealing with such reports all your life." Michael asked a question. "Unfortunately, it's accurate. Yeah, it fits. I don't understand. I'm blind. I've lived with a man for so long. I'm just now getting to know him for real. There's no doubt about the cheating, the fraud. Now these financial crimes and frauds to legalize my money. Adriana, he was good at hiding and concealing his identity, mimicry of the circumstances offered. You just trusted and opened up. You took care of your son and didn't meddle in anything. You got used to living your life the way you did with Benjamin. And not all men are decent. But when you've been away from such an ugly, nasty thing for a long time, you forget that it exists and maybe it's closer than you think. That's it." As best he could, supporting a woman who was on the brink of despair. And there's a limit to that, isn't there? No. How can you? I can't even pronounce "kill the woman who bore you a child." Adriana still sincerely did not believe in everything that was happening, that all this had happened and was still happening to her, all over the place. And unfortunately, especially when the price tag is a lot of money, the inheritance Benjamin left you. Yes, but when Ethan asked for money for the business, I gave it. I didn't control it. I didn't transfer it. The appetite comes with the food. The demands keep increasing. He wanted to have all your money, not just a handout. I guess that's how he saw it. I can't get it into my head. I need to get some sleep. What time is your meeting with Betty scheduled? 11. All the more reason. Get some rest. It's been a horrible, hard, long, nightmarish day, but it looks like the next one won't be any better. I didn't ask because you're coming with me to the meetings with her and then to the police. Of course I am." And that was that. They went to their rooms to get some air and sleep, if possible. Adriana thought she would never sleep from the shock and horror. But as soon as her head touched the pillow, the woman instantly passed out. In the morning, she was awakened by the clinking of plates and noise from the kitchen. Apparently, Michael was trying to cook something. In the morning, she came out of the room where she had slept, completely shattered. She glimpsed at the clock. It was almost 10. "Hi," she said hello. "Didn't you wake me up? Good morning. I wanted to give you a chance to get some rest and trust you with coffee. I decided not to cook. We're heading to the cafe anyway. I don't know if we'll be there or not. I'll go to the bathroom for about 10 minutes. Then I can have a quick coffee and go out so I won't be late." "Sure, I'll wait for you." 20 minutes later, they were already out of the apartment to meet Betty. Adriana was setting herself up for what was going to be a very difficult and hard day. But everything must be overcome, if not for her own sake, then at least for her son's sake.
When they walked in, they were already being waited on. Adriana introduced Michael and said that he would be with her if Betty didn't mind. "Of course not. Nice to meet you. It's a shame under these circumstances," Betty began the conversation in a friendly manner. "Judging by the fact that you didn't come here alone."
"Are you ready to take me up on my offer?" "Naturally, I have no other options. And I am very grateful for your help," Adriana said. "It's scary to imagine if it weren't for you. If it hadn't been for your message yesterday, what would have happened to me and what would have happened to Benjamin? And I must apologize to you for not trusting me. After all, you must understand how unexpected it all was. The woman had words prepared on the way to the meeting, but now they're all gone. Stop it. It's my own fault. I realized later that Ethan was married, but I didn't stop the relationship, I let it go. Let's just say that I'm just paying you back, a moral debt. So it's no big deal." "It's not nothing." Michael intervened. "I want to thank you too. If it wasn't for you, it would have been Adriana. In fact, you actually saved her life." When the words of gratitude, apology, and repentance were finally exhausted, the trio began to discuss more pressing problems. "What's our course of action?" "Step by step," Michael asked. "I've spoken to the people I plan to contact. They have convinced me that there is enough material not only to block the accounts, but also to send Ethan to a cell until the verdict is passed, so that he would spend the whole investigation not at liberty and under house arrest, but in a detention center. It would be nice if in addition to economic crimes we had evidence of preparation for crimes against life. But what do we have? I hope that the judge, who will make a decision, will be, and enough of what I have managed to collect and hand over to the hands of the investigation. So we go to the police now, and when Ethan is apprehended?" Michael wanted specifics. "Hopefully by tonight." "I was preparing yesterday, I didn't say. I'm sorry you were a stranger to me. I didn't know what to expect from you. They were also insured. Anyway, an investigation into the firm's activities is already underway." "That would be great. I promised I'd pick up my son tonight. I wanted to have everything settled by then." "Let's go then. What's the time to waste?" "Wait, let's eat first," the pragmatic Michael said. "We won't have time to sit down until tonight." Betty seconded the suggestion and Adriana had no choice. She didn't want to be stressed out, but she had no right to deprive the others of food. As the meal neared the end of Adriana's bag, the phone rang. It was Christina, the neighbor Benjamin was staying with. "Yes, Christina, something's wrong," the woman started the conversation excitedly. "Hi. I don't know, but I thought I'd warn you. Ethan just came by and took Benjamin. He asked me not to tell you." The neighbor echoed excitedly. "But I thought I should definitely let you know." "Thank you. He didn't say anything?" "No, he just said he was taking it." "You couldn't give it to him?" asked Christina fearfully. "But you didn't say anything? Isn't he the father?" "No, it's okay." "Thank you so much for letting me know," said Adriana and hung up the phone. Two pairs of eyes were looking at her intently, waiting for information. I left Benjamin with the neighbor Christina. She called to say that Ethan had come and taken the boy. He asked me not to be informed. Silence fell over the table. No one knew what to say or what to do. The easiest solution was to call Ethan, and we would dance from his answers. Michael was the first to answer. "There is no other option," the woman answered, already dialing her husband's phone number. But she did not have time to make a call. Her phone rang. Her husband dialed it himself. "Yes, Ethan, I'm listening." "I guess Christina called you already." "She just did." "Anyway, I know all about your partnership with Betty and your plans to pawn me off." Adriana didn't know what to say to that. She lip-synced to her friends, "He knows everything," and put the conversation on speakerphone. "And do I know about that too?" "Hey there, Michael." Ethan said it in a deliberately loud voice. "But I have an argument. My lovely wife, Benjamin, is with me." "What do you want?" Adriana said in a trembling voice. "You know very well the guarantees. Guarantees of your own safety, that no scowling, sullen men with handcuffs will come for me. And for that I need money. But the trouble is, it's all your money. So I have it." There was a nervous chuckle. "So gentlemen, I'm in the process of cashing in my investments. If anyone comes after me, the boy will never be seen again. That's clear, but clear," almost unanimously said all three of his invisible interlocutors. "Tomorrow evening I will be ready to hand over your son to you. And he's not yours. Don't you care? Are you ready?" Adriana couldn't take it anymore and burst into sobs. "Honey, you're the one who backed me into a corner. So you're the one who's responsible for all your problems. Don't interrupt me again or I'll hang up. Anyway, I'll be ready to give you Benjamin by tomorrow night. Moreover, we'll have to collect what I did not get to, what is stored in a safe deposit box, and the currency and family jewelry will give me tomorrow in exchange for my son. I don't hear an answer, okay?" The wife said obediently. "I'll call you tomorrow. Don't you dare to fidget. You've already put me in a hopeless situation with your neat moves. Before you do anything, please think about the fact that I have nothing to lose. You don't have to put me in a corner. You don't have to shut me down. Let me talk to my son. He's with the butterfly. Don't forget, darling." Again, Ethan grinned nastily. "You'll be on the social tomorrow, if the three of you behave yourselves. Ciao." The call ended. Ethan hung up. The three looked at each other in horror. A little boy was now at stake. "Let's go to my place," Michael said. "We need to talk in a private place." The women followed him obediently, silently, seeing in him both his confidence and some hope. When Michael arrived at his place, he asked the young ladies to leave their phones in another room. "We don't know how he found out about our plans. In this situation, it's better to be safe," he explained his behavior. When he closed the door behind him, Adriana was almost in a stupor. If she had been terrified before, at least there was a plan. Now she had no idea what she should do at all. And the worst part was that the price of making a mistake was her son. Betty and Michael looked at each other, realizing that they had better come up with something themselves, since Adriana was already in critical condition. "What do you think?" Betty abruptly switched to the first name, not expecting such familiarity. But there was no need to be polite in this situation. "I think, unfortunately, Benjamin. His guarantee is that he won't give it back at the meeting tomorrow." "I think so too. Where do you think he got his information?" "You'd have to ask Adriana." "Adriana." Betty asked her to focus. "Have you talked to anyone other than Michael?" "No. I haven't seen anyone else since I saw you yesterday." "No, I haven't." "Who did you talk to on the phone?" "But I had to make a deal with Christina." "Benjamin, she wanted to cry out loud, but she couldn't afford that luxury in this situation. And Kathy too. Who the hell is Kathy?" "She's my substitute before maternity leave, a friend from work." "And what did you say to her?" Michael immediately asked, sensing something wrong, that I needed her help. That I'd tell Ethan I'd gone to her place to help her with her paperwork. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Betty asked Michael. "I'm thinking, yes. It's the only weak link. I don't think Ethan has the resources for phone tapping and other spy stuff. So I think we should look for the easiest solution to the situation here too. It's Kathy," probably, the woman reflected. "It's something to keep in mind. But you can't be 100% sure. The question, the most important one that comes up, is whether to go alone tomorrow or call the police." Adriana suddenly said. She didn't even look up. She still looked at the floor and said 2 pairs of eyes looked at her with surprise. The unhappy mother finally looked at them, looked up. Why? There are more substantial matters to attend to. There's still time to get the valuables. They should definitely have them with them. There is little way he can find out whether you took them or not from the safe deposit box. How late do they work there? Michael asked. Excuse me. I didn't realize he had a general power of attorney. Why didn't he take them himself? Betty asked. It's quite simple, Adriana answered in a monotone voice. He probably wanted to do it just before my sudden demise, so as not to derail his plan. But the circumstances were like this. I didn't check the accounts. I was sure I was protected. I didn't check the safe deposit box specifically, but I did take jewelry out of it from time to wear for occasions. So I could have found this missing by accident. To answer your question, it's not until 4 on weekdays or in advance, so that after an hour you have to leave in the direction of the bank. Now I am waiting for an answer to my question. My dears, I know it's not an easy decision. I know what's at stake. That's why I want to know your opinion. My personal opinion. We need professionals. Answered Betty decidedly, most likely. And what do you think? Thinking that my son's life is at stake. And either way, I have to live with that. But I also think that Ethan won't be taking Benjamin to the meeting. He needs insurance. There's no other way out. Otherwise, I'm not going to see my son for sure. Here's what I'm thinking. Betty, do you know anyone who can help us quietly? Yeah, I think I do. Then go and make arrangements if you can. Michael and I are going to the bank. I, if nobody minds, don't want to go there alone, much less come back alone. That was settled. Betty went out a little earlier and caught a car. A few times we switched and changed the route as agreed before. God takes care of him. Adriana and her friend drove to the bank. William ran out to meet them almost immediately. Adriana, hello, we didn't get a chance to talk yesterday. Hello, William. I'm sorry, but I don't have time for this right now. Just please do everything I asked you to do yesterday. Right now I need to get to the vault. I need access to my safe deposit box. The man continued to fuss, concurrently arranging everything he needed to get to his safe deposit box. Adriana simply dumped all the contents into her huge woman's bag, leaving in it only a few letters her first husband had written to her. The memories made her heart clench even more. It seemed that it could not hurt more, but it always turned out to be a hurtful delusion. Why did you leave me, beloved? Mentally addressed the woman to her first husband. Barely holding back the flow of tears, Adriana could barely gather herself to pull herself together and go out to people again. Michael was already visibly nervous and immediately rushed to her. What took you so long? I'm fine. But when he saw the woman's eyes, he faltered. Everything went smoothly there. Yeah, let's go. They drove in the car in complete silence. The woman just needed to think about everything that had fallen on her in 24 hours. Her whole life had shattered into small pieces again almost instantly. The only thing that was at least somewhat comforting and empowering was that not all was lost yet. One must be strong, resilient, and believe in the best while there was still a chance. When the friends walked into the entryway, Betty was already waiting for them in the stairwell. Without saying a word, they entered the apartment so as not to make their conversation known to all the neighbors and random persons. Are you successful? How's it going? It's a deal. I'll let you know the place and time. We'll have help. Then came the worst part for everyone. The inactivity that drove all three of them crazy. They wanted to do something to do, not to be alone with their thoughts and worries. But at the same time, everything came down from their hands in a terrible, nervous state. Betty volunteered to cook dinner. Everyone needed to nourish themselves through not wanting to and not being able to. And at least try to get some sleep. The day tomorrow was going to be horrible, difficult, long and motorized, and it would end unpredictably. Everyone needed strength. At first everyone seemed to agree with him, but they pick at their plates without any enthusiasm. The night went even worse. No one could sleep a wink. 0600 hours and change. Adriana's cell phone rang. She nearly fell off her chair, daring to go to it. It was Ethan calling, of course. He set a place and time and disconnected, only reminding Adriana and her friends not to do anything stupid. Betty retreated to the next room to make a call from the landline. Fortunately, it was only 2 and the drive wasn't close. The meeting was scheduled out of town, so the time of dumb waiting was coming to an end. No one knew what lay ahead of them or what feelings they would be driving back with. But there was no choice. 40 minutes later, the trio set out for their appointment. They arrived a little early, with no one in sight. Minute to minute. You can't deny punctuality. Ethan's car pulled up. All three of them stared, trying to see if there was a child in the car. When Ethan got out, it was clear that he had come alone. "Look, I'm not that stupid. I told you, I want guarantees. Give me what I asked for. When will you give me my son back?" Adriana asked through her tears. "When?" "When I'm sure I'm in no danger. He's fine, of course. Give it to me." The wife hesitated to move away from her friends to give the bag to her husband. When the bag was in his hands, something terrible and wild began to happen. From nowhere, as if from under the ground, appeared people in masks and with weapons. "Get down. It's the riot police." Adriana didn't realize how she was on the ground. It even seemed to her that she lost consciousness. She came to her senses when she saw Betty and some unknown man she was talking to. "Like you've done better." "What's going on?" "The guys are taking a lot of precautions," the strange man said. He said, "Where's my son?" "Unfortunately, not yet." And then Adriana looked back at a familiar voice. It was definitely her husband yelling. He was snapping at her. Howled a spew of curses and threats at her spouse and everyone around her. "Give me your phone, please, and show in it a contact of yours, this Kathy." Deputy addressed Betty to her. Adriana obediently complied with what was asked of her. The unfamiliar man who had spoken to Betty began to dial the number in Ethan's phone. Well, good for her. The man chuckled happily. "What is it? What?" Was Adriana nervous? "There's a Sam renting under this number." "So?" "I don't understand." "Kathy's your leak, Ethan." "Adriana. Her role is being clarified, of course, but I think it's direct and permanent," Betty replied. "Adriana, don't worry." The stranger spoke again, addressing her personally. "Kathy's place has already been traveled to. Her phone has already been successfully traced. Almost certainly she has your son." All this dialogue, Ethan listened attentively, silent, afraid to miss something. And as soon as he heard the main thing, yelled even louder, even more selective, "Mate," pouring dirt on everyone, not hesitating in expressions. "And this is an additional confirmation of our assumption." The man nodded his head. "Let's go to the department and wait for the results. All of you will be required to testify." The determined stranger got behind the wheel of Adriana's car. She wasn't able to do it herself and drove them to their destination. "When will there be any news about my son?" "As soon as I get the call. Try to calm down." "And who are you?" Adriana finally decided to ask the question that should have been asked in the first place. "Liam is also a friend and classmate of Betty's. And I'm a police officer." Exhaustive. Adriana only nodded awkwardly in response. For some reason, it felt awkward. They'd already pulled up to the place. There was still no call from Liam. Adriana was ready to be hysterical when suddenly the phone rang. No one could hear the person on the other end of the line. Betty or Adriana froze, listening carefully to what the man was saying to guess what it was about. "Great. You know the order? First the ambulance is meticulously examined, then straight to us. Liam passed out. What's wrong with my son? What did they do to him? Why the ambulance?" "Adriana, I understand, but be quiet, please. It's standard procedure to make sure she's okay. Let's go. Liam, talk to Michael first. We'll Skype. We'll have coffee. Adriana, we need to calm down. Okay, don't delay. We need to do things quickly here. The baby will be brought in and to break and go with it. There's nothing for the baby to do here." Betty nodded and took Adriana's hand. She turned toward the coffee stand. "Let's go." "I take it he's okay, right?" Adriana asked, not believing her happiness. Yes, everything. Rest faster, we'll calm down, you'll testify sooner and, therefore, you'll go home with your son sooner now." Adriana only now caught the gist of it when Betty repeated what Liam had said. It hadn't gotten through to her at first. Kathy had him. She couldn't believe it. "Like I told you the day before yesterday, you never would have believed yesterday morning that your life would take such a sharp turn. Your husband betrayed you, turned out to be a total stranger. And then there's this friend. You've never even called her a friend. Yeah, you're right. Okay, I'm ready. Wait, take your time. Drink your coffee and let's go in peace. Liam, the investigators are talking to Michael right now anyway. Isn't Liam an investigator? No, he's an operative. What's the difference? Are you really interested now? Betty smiled. I don't know anything right now. I just want to see Benjamin as soon as possible to make sure he's all right. Realizing that he would be brought in soon and not to worry, let's go. Time turned out to be the glass endlessly long. As Adriana chatted with the two men and answered their questions in detail, she wanted to get out. Maybe I can answer all your questions tomorrow? She asked, in a pleading tone. I need to see my son. How can you not understand with him? Their Betty is your friend. Adriana, we all understand the stress you're under and how tired you are. It's all emotion, and please understand that the first interview in our case is very important. It is important what questions we will ask and what information we will have at this stage of the investigation. Note that we are not asking you what Betty or Michael can tell us in full. Anything you say now will make our job easier and may bring the criminals to justice for the maximum amount of time they deserve. The investigator gently, firmly explained to her the situation. Twitching and nervous for her baby, she did not stop, but at least she stopped getting angry at what is useless, wasting time. Adriana spent more than an hour and a half in the office, and when she came out, the first thing she saw was her son, who was hanging around Betty as if nothing had happened. Either mom, Benjamin rushed over to her. My little son. Adriana hugged him tightly, still unable to believe that he was here, that he was all right. On the one hand, she realized that overly vivid emotions could frighten the boy, but she couldn't hide them at all. Tears just instinctively sprang from her eyes. She couldn't help it. Why are you crying? Benjamin frowned. I really missed you, baby. We haven't seen each other for 2 whole days. Can you imagine? And you've grown up so much. A real man. Mom was jokingly translating her emotions as best she could, so as not to frighten the boy, who didn't seem to understand what had happened or the danger he was in. Adriana exhaled and thanked goodness. It would be wonderful if he never knew what had happened to him and who his biological father was and what he had done and wanted to do to them. Come on, I'll take you home. You need to get some rest. A smiling Betty came over. I don't want to rest. I've had a good night's sleep, the little boy replied ingenuously. Then you'll tell me in detail how you spent these days. Okay, hugged his mom. The next few days passed for Adriana in absolute happiness, as simple happiness is the absence of grief. The surest way to show a person that they are doing just fine is to take away what they had and then give it back to them. Simple truths that we learn only through our own sad experience. No one can fathom this wisdom speculatively. On the 3rd day, she got a call. Adriana had been summoned by an investigator. She came, expecting nothing good. In general, the conversation did not bode well at first. Some details were clarified and a statement was read out. Betty and Michael asked if she corroborated them. The investigators were about to let Adriana go when she had the nerve to ask the question herself. Did you find out Kathy's role? I might know. I thought you'd already been briefed. Kathy is the organizer, the mastermind behind everything Ethan has done, from the heinousness of immoral acts to crimes. Apart from the adultery, of course, and our relationship in general, our marriage. Oh yes, it was all calculated several steps ahead. So many years of patient people. But it had to end for you very soon. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. If it wasn't for Betty, so you're not saying you're lovers, then? Yes, they met long before you met him, supposedly by chance. Them, as you must have guessed by now. He even took a job at that firm and came to meet you. It's a very detailed deposition. The couple were playing each other for keeps, so there's a lot of detail. Each wanted to drown the other and make themselves look better, if that's possible given the context. Unbelievable. Adriana was shocked. This was something she hadn't expected. Betty's quote about what she even knew and understood a few days ago came back into her head. What an idiot I am. How often I hear it here in this office. You don't have to blame yourself. You were unlucky, you stepped, pardon my French, in shit, but it's not your fault. I believed. Everyone does. The man interrupted her sternly. Moreover, I advise you not to stop believing in people and people. You, concentrating on the bad, But once you look back, what would have happened to you without Betty and your friend Michael? Think about that, and thank God for the lessons. It's hard not to agree with you. Adriana came out pancakes from the study and from the new information, from the meanness of people that crossed all limits of good and evil, and of the sermon that the investigator gave her last. It was something to think about. A little over 6 months had passed. It took Adriana a long time to come to her senses after everything that had happened. The only good thing was that Benjamin didn't need psychological help. He didn't have any injuries. It was just an adventure for him. His mother really hoped that it would stay that way for him forever. She was worried at first that her son would ask about Dad and that she would answer his questions, and the endless why points. Thankfully, Benjamin had not noticed Ethan's disappearance from their lives at all. Apparently, he had been home so infrequently before that his father figure had not had time to form for the child. Now Michael came over and played with him much more often. He seemed to have spent more time with the guy in that time, just coming over, than Ethan had in his entire life. Benjamin came to visit Betty. Adriana had a girlfriend for the first time. Despite the ambiguity of their first meeting and Betty's relationship with Ethan, it was all in the past, long ago laundered. But what Betty had done for her in her hour of need was impossible to forget. One day the bell rang unexpectedly in Adriana's apartment. On the doorstep stood a joyful Michael. "Hello. Get ready. Betty is waiting for you at your cafe." "I'll stay on the farm. Did something bad happen?" "Absolutely nothing. Go and have fun." Adriana obediently packed up and headed to the meeting. At the same cafe near the bank, her friend was waiting for her. "Hi," she was happy. Already turning to the waiter, said, "Already you can carry champagne and champagne directly, so good reason at the occasions cannot count. But I'm all in anticipation. To start with the drum roll. Today the court sentenced Ethan. They're moving to juvie for a solid sentence." "Really, that's great. It's weird. My lawyer called me. You know, I sent him in my place. I didn't want to go to trial and see those faces and hear their ridiculous excuses. I asked him to tell me the good news myself. There's more news." "Judging by your satisfied face," Adriana smiled. "What about the civil suit?" "Your civil suit has been fully satisfied. All your money's coming back to you, every penny of it." I didn't doubt it. It was obvious, but the official decision is very satisfying. Benjamin will have a secure future. That's the main thing. From the look in your eyes. And it's not over. Yes, the big news we saved for you this afternoon is Michael proposed to me. Oh, I'm so excited, you guys. Adriana was very upset. "Betty, I wish you all the best. I'm glad I didn't overlook such a treasure. Finally, this hardened bachelor will have a ring. Oh, thank you. I hope we get to hang out at your wedding too. Oh, wait. I just got officially divorced. I need a vacation. Okay, I propose a toast." Betty gave us a big smile to put all the bad things from the day behind us. And ahead of us was Michael, and the best happiness we deserved. God willing. Adriana held out her glass to a man and his friend to our future, happiness and success.